Hello, everybody. How are you doing this fine Tuesday? We are live. It is 11:22 a.m. Eastern. I was on down the Rabbit Hole News channel yesterday for like hours and hours, and I adjusted my mic on there, so hopefully it's not doing anything weird. Okay, so today I want to dedicate the show mostly to the Celeste Rivas Hernandez David case. If anything, happens in the Reckless Ben slash Lego, saga situation today, I'll switch over to it. But I did update the title in the thumbnail to basically just focus on the David Celeste Rivas Hernandez case today. So just to let y'all know, you might have clicked on this thinking it was going to be Lego. I'm going to go over Lego stuff. Maybe if I do, it'll be at the end, or it'll be, or like, like not the first half or the first part of the video. And I'm probably thinking I'm only going to go over Lego stuff if something new happens. I mean, I do know some new stuff has happened since I made my last video, but I've been feeling a little under the weather, and I just like don't really feel like switching back and forth with like stories and stuff unless something does come up. Also, there's a lot to cover on this David case. So, like I said, I was on Down the Rabbit Hole News's channel yesterday for hours, way longer than I originally anticipated being on there yesterday, but it was cool. It was really fun over there. There was like a panel of people. Kadisha Lynn was on there. Steve Fisher. I was on a panel with Steve Fisher yesterday. He was on there talking about getting attacked in the courthouse and all of that. So I would invite y'all to go and check out Down the Rabbit Hole News. She actually is the one who sent me the transcripts that we started reading this past Thursday, and we'll probably continue reading today. But before we get into any of that, I did want to just go over what happened in the trial, like as a 30,000 foot view. This is a New York Times article. I figured this one's, as good a starting point as any. And I just want to kind of like read through. It's about a 10-minute article without any commentary. From, like I said, from the New York Times. I think it came out yesterday. And this, excuse me, and this is basically like an overview of what happened during the preliminary hearing. So I thought, let's start here. The decision, okay, so it says David unalive case can go to trial. Judge rules. The decision capped a 5-day preliminary hearing. Okay, so this preliminary hearing, originally they were saying was going to be maybe 3 to 4, 3 to 5 days. It did end up coming in right at 5 days. So the longer end of that. But the big TLDR is that the judge said it can go to trial. That's what this hearing was for. Like we talked about many times on this channel, David could have gone, or I should say the prosecutors could have gone the route of getting a grand jury or trying to get a grand jury to indict David. They did not do that. Instead, what they did was assembled a investigative grand jury to pretty much answer the question, is there enough probable cause to send this case forward to a trial? Now, importantly, that doesn't mean he's guilty. That just means the judge said, all right, I've seen enough to know that I'll be able to, I can send this on to a jury. Y'all can go sort all this out at trial. So the judge did go ahead and decide to allow it to move forward. Now, there are 3 different charges against David. There is the inappropriate relation with a minor charge, there's the actual unalive charge, and then there is the charge of the dismemberment and the mutilation of the body. So it's 3 different charges. And within the 3 different charges, there are actually within just one of those charges, the unalive charge, there are, I was saying yesterday 3, actually there's 4 special circumstances. And it appeared there's like sentence enhancements. That doesn't mean that, if the prosecutors can't prove the special enhancements, that doesn't mean that they can't still prove the underlying, which is, first degree unalive or whatever. This is the California Penal Code 187A, same thing Aunt Heffy is charged with. But again, like I said, David has 4 special circumstances. One is supposedly lying in wait. These are all allegations, of course, till he's proven guilty in court. Another special circumstance is unaliving someone for financial gain. or financial purposes. The third special circumstance is unaliving a witness to a crime, so eliminating a witness to a crime. And then the fourth special circumstance, which doesn't get talked about quite as much, is use of a deadly weapon. So they're alleging that David used a sharp object, possibly a knife, something like that. So the subtitle of this New York Times article says the decision capped a 5-day preliminary hearing, which prosecutors detailed how and why they say David unalived the 14-year-old Celeste. After 5 days of often grim and unsettling testimony and evidence that was shown, a judge in Los Angeles said on Monday that she would allow the murder case against the singer to go to trial. The ruling by the judge, Charlene F. Olmedo of Los Angeles Superior Court, indicates that she found probable cause that David had unalived Celeste, a 14-year-old whose severely decomposed body was in the trunk. Y'all know that part. A trial date has not been selected, but lawyers agreed to meet in the coming weeks to begin devising a schedule. The judge ordered that David, whose real name is David Anthony Burke, will be held without bail. Okay, so no bail for David. That's seems to be an update, which, I mean, I know he already had no bail, but I didn't know it seems like the way they wrote this article, it seems like they recently agreed again. The judge recently said again, no bail. David, who is perhaps best known for creating the anthem for the video game Fortnite, no, I think David's best known from this criminal trial. Like, let's be serious here. He was charged in April with first degree, as well as felony counts of lewd acts with a minor and mutilation of human remains. The charge came with what are known as special circumstances, making David eligible for a maximum sentence of life without the possibility of parole or even the death penalty. Now, we do know he has pleaded not guilty. The next time he's going to be going to court is going to be August 31st when he will be rearraigned on his charges. So he's going to probably plead not guilty again unless somehow, in the coming weeks they come up, or about a month, they come up with some type of plea agreement. The article says it's not unusual for a judge to allow a case to go to trial after a preliminary hearing. This is very common. The standard of proof required is simply to advance a legal proceeding is lower than during an actual trial. So this is the probable cause standard instead of the beyond a reasonable doubt standard. So there's a lower standard here at this stage, just to let it go to the next stage. That at that point, a jury is going to have to determine whether the defendant is guilty. Now, the district attorney, the LA County District Attorney, said after the judge's determination on Monday, his office had not yet decided if they're going to be seeking the death penalty or not. They still haven't decided if they're going to do death penalty or not. He said it will present additional and significant evidence at the trial. And that's really the big question, right? Like, we know that there was some evidence presented, and some of it was extremely important evidence, probably some of the most important evidence that's going to come up at the trial. But we also know a lot of stuff was not presented, and most of the witnesses that are going to end up being called probably weren't called. We didn't get any friend testimony, any family testimony, any testimony from anyone except a couple people from the record label and some detectives, and who worked on investigating. So it would be detectives, sheriffs, the people from the police and the prosecutor and the police and the sheriff and stuff like that. So the district attorney said during his press conference yesterday, quote, "This was difficult evidence to even hear." And this was, he was talking about this sometimes graphic images and testimony that came up in the preliminary hearing. But then the district attorney said, but also the crime we are dealing with is incredibly horrific and barbaric. Celeste was reported missing several times in 2024 from her home in Lake Elsinore, California, about 70 miles southeast of Los Angeles. She was 13 at the time. Her remains were found in September of last year in that car. Months of frenzied speculation about what had transpired ensued, but the police remained quiet until they arrested David this spring. Now, when they ended up arresting David, they arrested him right around the year anniversary of when he is alleged to have taken away Celeste Rivas Hernandez's life. So they arrested him like April 29th or something. they claim that 2025, no, sorry, excuse me. They arrested him April 20 something this year, 2026. But they also allege that he unalived Celeste April 23rd last year. So it's about a year from the unaliving and the arrest. Almost exactly, within a week or so. In preparation for the preliminary hearing, prosecutors sketched the outlines of their case. In court documents, they said David met Celeste when she was 11 and began a certain relationship with her when she was just 13. Horrible and horrendous and illegal. In April 2025, this was a year ago, Celeste was 14. David and Celeste got into an argument before David invited her to his home and fatally stabbed her, according to the court documents. These are allegations until proven in court. In the weeks that followed from the unaliving, prosecutors said in the documents that David placed Celeste's body in an inflatable pool and chop, chop, chop with a chainsaw that he had ordered online. He stuffed her remains into a bag and put the bag in the trunk of the Tesla. Now, during the preliminary hearing, this began on July 21st, prosecutors broadened their narrative with some new details. See, they had put out this 9-page evidence brief type of thing where pretty much they had outlined their case. It was like a very bare bones type of thing, but they pretty much outlined the case in that 9-page document. Well, during the preliminary hearing, this started exactly a week ago today, prosecutors broadened their narrative with new details. Investigators made clear that David had met Celeste through social media, and photos were displayed in court and showed David had a tattoo. This was huge breaking development that we did not know. And this actually, I did an entire Withered album analysis this morning. Well, I'll say a lyrical analysis. I didn't listen to all the songs, but I looked at all the lyrics, and there's one of the songs, I think it's called One Last Dance. Yeah, I think it's called One Last Dance, where David had said something like, he was like, I'll never forget you. I'll never be able to forget you, blah, 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 something, something. I'm obviously paraphrasing. And then it was like, I'll never forget you or be able to forget you as long as I have hands, or I'll always remember you every time I look at my hands. And when I was reading those lyrics this morning, it definitely made me think about this, and I thought about those lyrics. I'm sure I've read them before, but I thought about it in a different way now that we know that David had also had matching tattoo with Celeste. So David had 2 hand tattoos, and so did Celeste. Finger tattoos, I should say. And David had 2 finger tattoos. One of the finger tattoos David had was shh on his finger, shh with the little dot, dot, dot. The other finger tattoo he had was on his basically like wedding finger, and it said Celeste. That was news that came out at this preliminary hearing. Now, we also had heard that Celeste, her remains were found with the same exact tattoo on the finger, but she also had a tattoo on her wedding ring finger in American culture at least, that said David. So they had 2 matching finger tattoos. He had she had He had Celeste, she had David. Okay. So interesting that one of his songs is like, all I have to do, I want to look at my hand. If I want to remember you. Let me see. Hold on. I wrote it down. I don't want to like get too far off track here, but it was interesting enough for me to write down. Let me see. Yeah, it was like something about like watching her go, empty your brain, eyes wide shut, he says in this song. 40 degrees. This is the song with the 40 degrees around us. Quote, only way I'm letting you go is if I can't see my hands. Then he said something about while they stare at us, don't stop the music. Most of these people don't mean nothing. Right foot, left foot, dance, dance. Girl, I have a whole, like I said, I did a whole analysis of the lyrics of the Weathered Withered album after looking, into this preliminary hearing this week, but I don't want to do the full lyrical analysis yet with y'all until I get the transcripts in my possession and also read, because I actually want to know. I actually want to know if everything that was said in court first, because of course, thank you so much, and shout out to the people who did go to court and did report. That they were our eyes and ears inside the courtroom, and I'm very appreciative of them. I've been watching all the coverage from the different people who have been in there. Well, not all of it, but as much as I can, and all that. But like, obviously, that's not the same exact thing as like seeing the exact words that people, said in court, and different things like that, in order, line by line. So that's why I did want to go over hopefully the rest of the transcript from day one. So when I'm able to get day 2, day 3, we can just go and move forward and read it as it happened, so that we can get a better idea, since there was no cameras and really no transparency at all. Thanks, Beth Silverman. That's the only way we're going to be able to do it. So hopefully we'll be able to get those transcripts soon. Okay, so moving forward in this article, the preliminary hearing, prosecutors broadened what they had already kind of laid out in that 9-page document. They made it clear that David had met Celeste through social media, and they put photos up in court showing that David had a tattoo that said Celeste on one of his fingers, and another tattoo that said shh on another finger. Now, this second tattoo appears to match the shh tattoo that was found on Celeste. It was like a matching tattoo. Now, according to testimony from one of the witnesses who testified, or one of the, people speaking at the hearing, this guy's name was Squirrel. This was one of the two investigators on this case. The other one is Josh Byers. So Squirrel's on the stand. He said that Celeste's family was actually aware of her relationship with David. I don't know if they exactly knew how old he was, but they definitely were aware of the existence of a David in Celeste's life. According to the investigator, Squirrel, some of Celeste's family members had even interacted with David, and Celeste had lived for a time with a relative, I think it was an aunt, in Los Angeles, closer to David. So the parents, maybe thought, Celeste's over there living with my family member, but in reality, she was sneaking and lurking and creeping over there to David's house. Excruciating testimony sought to establish the sexual nature of the relationship between David and this, of course, minor, which is abhorrent and just disgusting and despicable that he was doing this, if true. The investigator spent much of one afternoon describing photograph after photograph of what investigators believed to be David and Celeste performing acts on each other, as well as going over text messages between David and Celeste discussing very adult topics like birth control, pregnancy, eliminating as such when she was only 13 and 14 years old. And at the time, David would have been 18 and 19. So like an adult for sure, and over the age of adult, and also like 5 years older than Celeste. Okay. So the family lawyer for Celeste's family, I would imagine that this guy, he's kind of like the Douglas Wigdor. He's the personal lawyer for the family. I imagine he's going to be doing some suing coming up here against David at some point on the behalf of the family and on the behalf of the decedent estate and things like that. Celeste, basically. He described family members' mindsets yesterday after the whole thing was said and done, and the judge said, yeah, we're going to go to trial on this, on all issues, all special counts and all that. The lawyer for Celeste's family stood up and made a speech, a press conference himself. He said he was relieved by the decision to allow this to move forward. Celeste's parents were sitting in court for much of the preliminary hearing, the 5-day hearing, but they did leave at a prosecutor's encouragement during certain testimony, including testimony about acts that had occurred between David and Celeste. Allegedly, according to prosecutors, that's what they say occurred. So before they got into all that, the prosecutor kind of turned to the parents and said, look, we're about to be getting into some stuff, like y'all might want to leave. And they did. They did leave. In testimony on Monday, Mr. Farrell said that David and Celeste had exchanged more than 8,000 text messages. I think it was way more than that. I think it was like 100,000, but like 8,000 within a short period of time. At least 8,000, we'll say. They discussed plans to move in together. But in March 2025, so a little over a year ago, Celeste wrote, quote, "I don't want anything to do with you in person anymore." Now, she would be dead the next month, by the way, according to prosecutors. So again, in testimony that came just yesterday. So yesterday was the last day of the preliminary hearing. And yesterday, this detective investigator guy, Corey Farrell, he was the only witness that came up. And he was talking about text messages between David and Celeste. And he was really bringing the timeline along of like, look, this is when they met, like how the prosecutors presented the evidence at the preliminary hearing was kind of like, when did they meet? How was she found? And then they kind of skipped over like those types of facts and stuff. One day they spent pretty much one whole day on finances. And so that was not as much of a gruesome day. But then the next day after that, they went back into gruesome land. They talked about the autopsy and how Celeste's remains were found. And then they kind of worked backwards. And we're like, okay, so when did they meet? How long did they know each other? They bring in the evidence of like in 2024, 2 years ago, the cops were looking for a missing, at that point, 13-year-old Celeste. They end up showing up to David's house that he was living at the time. So they bring you all the way through. And then yesterday was kind of like the ending point, was like everything that led up to the moments of Celeste's death. When they presume, the death did occur. And of course, we all also had David's attorneys pushing back really hard on the prosecution, doing their own version of cross-examination and stuff like that. So that's where it really ended yesterday, was like, what were the last text messages that were leading up to when prosecutors are claiming that Celeste lost her life? And that is the context of kind of like this right here. Leading up to it, this was a month before. She passed away in April 2025, according to prosecutors. So this is March, 1 month prior. She told David, I don't want, quote, anything to do with you in person anymore. Okay. I don't want to mess with you. I don't want to even, just leave me alone. Now, at one point, Celeste did threaten David, according to prosecutors, to leak information about their relationship. Celeste threatened to send text messages to David's family, I think his mom. She threatened to end his career. She even threatened to unalive him, according to these text messages. Now, during the hearing, David's lawyer, one of his lawyers, Blair Burke, said Celeste had actually hit David and threatened to unalive herself. But then that was kind of objected to and sustained. So that line of questioning wasn't really allowed at the preliminary hearing. But I imagine it may be allowed at the trial. So even though in March 2025, Celeste told David, I don't want anything to do with you in person anymore. The next month, April 2025, this would be just one day before she passed away, Celeste repeatedly appealed to David, asking to see him. According to testimony during the hearing, the next day, David arranged an Uber to drive Celeste to his home, according to the messages that were shown in court. According to these records, about 20 minutes after Celeste arrived to David's home, he sent messages to her asking where she was. Okay. And this is the JOMA 20 minutes. Okay. This is like, a lot can happen in 20 minutes. What happened in those 20 minutes? We really don't know. But prosecutors are claiming and alleging, and they're going to try and prove that's when she lost her life, in those 20 minutes. Very critical, possibly the most critical 20 minutes of the whole trial. And we don't, as of now, have any video evidence of it. Of those moments. Of course, there's a lot of evidence. There's a lot of evidence. There's circumstantial evidence. There's direct evidence. There's all kinds of evidence, forensic, testimonial, video, photo. There's blood. There's fingerprints. There's all kind of DNA stuff. There's all kind of stuff. Okay. So there's a lot of evidence, but for those exact 20 minutes, we don't have video evidence as of now that we know of what happened in those 20 minutes. So she gets out of the Uber, 20 minutes go by, And then David starts sending text messages to her phone. Hey, where are you? She died that day, the 23rd. 2 days later, April 25th, 2025, David's first album is released. And that's the one that I did go over the lyrical analysis of. It's called Withered. Now, during this preliminary hearing that did last 5 days, it ended yesterday, there was another detective who detailed records that appeared to show David taking a trip to Santa Barbara County just really moments after Celeste had, according to prosecutors, been killed. A California Highway Patrol officer testified during the hearing, and he said he had recovered Celeste's passport card from a worker with the state's Department of Transportation. So there's the Department of Transportation worker who found Celeste Rivas Hernandez's passport card and, turns it over to the police or whatever. So there was a highway patrol officer who testified about it. He claimed that the Department of Transportation worker found the passport card on a dirt shoulder off a highway in Santa Barbara County. Forensics experts who examined David's Tesla and his house in the Hollywood Hills where he had been staying, they found possible blood on many items. An analyst with the police department testified that the apparent blood stains matched Celeste Rivas Hernandez's DNA. So Celeste's DNA was probably blood, was found in the Tesla and in the house. Lawyers for David cross-examined all of these witnesses, but they did not call any witnesses of their own. Throughout the preliminary hearing, David's lawyers tried to raise questions over why items discovered by the authorities were not more carefully handled, or why the authorities didn't do more testing on some of the stuff that they found, on some of the evidence and things like that. They forced Mr. Farrell, remember the second of the two detective investigators, they forced him to acknowledge that the department did not speak with witnesses or review video footage showing Celeste exiting an Uber or entering David's house on the night they say she was killed. They argued that the blood evidence presented didn't support their charges and that prosecutors had not actually shown that David acted with malice. They don't have to show any of that at this stage. All they have to do is show probable cause, which clearly they did. Okay, so that was the kind of 30,000 foot overview. This is just an ABC New York article that was published the end of day 4, I believe. So let's just read this one. This is from ABC. Detective testifies David's phone contained sexually graphic photos of Celeste and also texts about deleting a pregnancy. Graphic testimony continued Friday on day 4 in the preliminary hearing for David as a judge was weighing whether there was sufficient evidence for David to stand trial in the killing of Celeste. Prosecutors were seeking to prove David began abusing Celeste when she was 13 and he was 18. Then he poked her to no longer among the living, and that was all because she threatened to reveal their long sexual history and ruin his career. An LAPD detective testified about explicit photographs found on David's phone that allegedly depicted acts between David and Celeste. Now, they did not show these photographs in court, from what I understand, thank God, but the detective did describe it in detail, according to people who were in there. I didn't go. I wasn't in there. Thank you, Danny, for the jewels. Thank you, Dark Sahara Rose, for the $2. Came for the Legos, staying for the oh my God, he did what? Yeah, chop chop. It's been a rough one, girl. Thank you, Crystal, for the 10 jewels gold coin. Thank you, Player Profit, for the $5 Canadian. Thank you, BJ. I was worried you wouldn't go in on this case because of the bricks and the miniature figs. I'm so here for your bonus research. Thank you to MJ for the 10 jewels, and thank you to Zine for the 2 jewels and sparkles. Okay, let's get back to this article. This was after day 4. The detective described numerous text messages between David and Celeste discussing pregnancy and deleting one, including some messages sent 2 months after Celeste's 13th birthday. So she was 12 2 months before, and then these text messages about pregnancy. One message from David said, "Let's let this pregnancy deletion be the last one till we have the real one." Because the other one wasn't a real one? Girl. And somebody had pointed out, this is obvious GROO, Ming behavior. Like, first of all, he's talking to a 12 or a 13 or a 14-year-old here. I guess 13. And he's like obviously stacking, pregnancy deletions on top of one another. And he's like, oh, let's let this one be the last one. Well, who has control over that, David? You. Ugh. Anyway, as the images and text messages were discussed in court, Celeste's mom began to cry, and her father, understandably, looked down as the detective began describing the photos. Now, some less explicit photos of David and Celeste kissing and laying in the bed together were shown on a screen in the courtroom. Deputy District Attorney Beth Silverman came over to comfort the mother of Celeste, and the mom and the dad got up and then they left the courtroom. David was back in the courtroom for the preliminary hearing. He's charged with, what he's charged with. The day began with testimony from the medical examiner. Okay, so this was Friday. The medical examiner testified. She described the autopsy and the condition of Celeste's body when it was discovered. According to this testimony, the body was so decomposed, some of it had liquefied. Celeste's body was discovered in a Tesla nearly 5 months after authorities say that she was unalived. The medical examiner testified that Celeste's arms and legs had been chop off of her body using some type of power tool, but the examiner said the exact tool couldn't be determined because the level of decomposition was so immense. Now, 2 fingers from Celeste had been severed, including one that had the name David on it, and that finger is gone. Throughout the testimony, David Burke, remained stoic. He showed no apparent emotion in court when this medical examiner was talking about how the body was found. Financial witnesses also testified that David's music had earned him at least $10 million between the years he knew Celeste, 2023 and 2025. Under the name David, D4vd, he began writing and recording songs for YouTube videos he created of the video game Fortnite. As a teen, the music was a blend of indie rock, R&B, lo-fi pop, and made him a phenomenon on TikTok, SoundCloud, and Spotify, where his top songs, including Romantic Homicide, have more than 1 billion plays. In 2023, he released 2 EPs and opened for SZA on tour. Last year, he performed at Coachella and released a full album that he was on tour promoting when the body was discovered. Yeah. So now I think I want to go back to the transcripts. I do have the day 1 transcript. We made it to about page 70 last time, so I want to make our way through that. I want to continue on here. I'm not obviously going to reread the first 70 pages. We're going to start around that time, and we'll just keep moving forward because I want to know everything that was actually said in this courtroom, and it's unfortunately the case that this is the only way we have to do it as of now. Okay, so where we left off on this transcript, it was the last day that the car had ever been driven. The last day that David's Tesla, according to prosecutors, had ever been driven. And he parked it like down the block and around the corner down the block. And then he obviously had to walk from the car back to his house. So that's what we are. And that was when he had gone to the Ross Dress for Less. And they caught him on the cameras and all that. So we were on that day. Look at the person. We can see just where the yellow line ends, the enlargement you see on the right side. Sorry, what are we looking at? They have the detective on the stand. This is from day 1 of the hearing. That's Mr. Burke walking down the street into ultimately his residence. Okay. In the video you watch, so this is Beth asking, as he walked down Bluebird Avenue, is that adjacent to Doheny Place? Detective, answer, yes. So you don't see Bluebird Avenue actually, but you do see where it is. Then you go from where the vehicle is parked. You have to walk down Bluebird Avenue to Doheny Place to get to the position where David is in that photo. Okay. Then on the video, you saw him go into his residence at 1368 Doheny Place? Yes. Okay. So you could see him walking from the direction of Bluebird, where the vehicle was parked, and then eventually it got towed from that spot? Yes, ma'am. Okay. Your Honor, I want to put forth another exhibit. These are 2 photographs called Defendant's Tesla Parked Across 1405 Bluebird, Hollywood Hills, May 24th, 2025. If those 2 photographs could be marked as People's Exhibit number 12, okay, People's Exhibit 12, this is pictures of David's Tesla parked across from Bluebird. Let's start with the photograph on the left. What do we see from this photograph? This was taken May 24th. The detective said, well, that's a photograph that was taken by senior lead officer from the Hollywood area. He was called out by a neighbor concerning a vehicle that had been parked in the same spot for some time. Okay, this is in May. May? But her body wasn't found and the car wasn't towed until September. This is a photograph taken in May. Okay? Because a neighbor called and said they had been parked in that same spot for a long time. This is 4 months. 4 months before the car was towed. Looking at the photo, and this is before he moved it for the last time. So this must have been like there in May 2025. Her body probably was in there, but he moved it. And then in July, later on, he moved it back to that spot. Looking at the photograph to the right, what do you see? That's the back of the vehicle. It was taken to identify the license plate of that vehicle and some damage to the rear trunk portion. Okay, next question. How did you, did you also review data from license plate readers on LPRs? I think this is like patrol officer cars showing the Tesla parked at the same location that it was recovered from, where the vehicle remained after July 29th of 2025 until it was eventually towed. Okay, so David had a habit of parking the car in that spot. It had happened all the way in May. Then the cops get called. He moves it, I guess. And then eventually in July, he parks it there again, and that's where it's ultimately towed from. He said, I conducted a license plate reader search. Okay, come through flock cams. Are these constitutional? I want to know. Whatever. I'm glad that they're being used to track David, but identifies when police cars drive by that are equipped with automated license plate readers. They identify vehicles. So I conducted a search from July 29th on this vehicle license plate. And the vehicle remained in that same spot on multiple hits on that license plate reader up until September 5th, when it was finally eventually towed. Okay, next question. During the investigation, detective, you and your partner were conducting on this deceased female dismembered in the trunk of the Tesla. Were you notified at some point that an individual by the name of Jesus Rivas had called LAPD regarding his daughter? Okay, so now we're talking about Celeste Rivas Hernandez's father, Jesus. Yes, the officer or the detective said on September 10th, Mr. Rivas, Celeste's dad, called communications, and that call was forwarded to my cell phone, or of my partner, my cell phone of my partner. So we made a subsequent follow-up phone call to Celeste's dad. Okay, next question. You testified at the beginning today. On September 8th, you were called out to this police tow yard with respect to a deceased female being found in the front trunk? Yes. So when you went out to the tow yard on September 8th, when y'all found the body, were there media cameras and media attention that day or the following day? This is September 8th. The investigator said, yes, there was. There was media. A helicopter was there during the investigation, and Then, as that vehicle was being towed away, there were attempts by the media to follow the car to the impound lot. Okay, when you say towed away, you mean as you caused to have the Tesla towed from the impound yard to Piper Tech for processing? Yes, he said. Okay. Next question. The media attention that was generated. Did Mr. Jesus Rivas tell you he had observed the media attention or the coverage and that he was concerned that perhaps the unidentified decedent was his daughter? Your Honor, this calls for hearsay. Calls for what? Hearsay. It is hearsay. Right? Because it's like, did he tell you? So instead of did he tell you, to make it not hearsay, you had to get him up on the stand. So Blair Burke is saying she doesn't want hearsay. All right. And Beth Silverman said, Your Honor, this has been a cop for 26 years. David's lawyer said, I don't think this is his personal knowledge. Did he interview Mr. Jesus Rivas? This is David's lawyer. The judge is like, okay, can you read the question again? I don't even know the question. Beth Silverman, the prosecutor's like, you know what? I'll just rephrase it, Your Honor. Okay, all right. So let me rephrase the question, Beth says. She says, so, detective, after you were notified that Celeste's father called LAPD, did you eventually speak with Celeste's father? Yes, he says. Okay. Did you also speak with or use his son as an interpreter? Yes. So Celeste's brother was an interpreter between Celeste's dad and the police. Okay. And did Celeste's dad ever communicate with you that based on the media attention, he suspected his daughter is the deceased female in the front trunk of the Tesla? Yes. Were you also provided with 2 phone numbers for his daughter? That would be Celeste, 2 phone numbers. Were you provided with 2 phone numbers for Celeste's daughter? Yes. Did you write search warrants for those phones? Yes. One of those phone numbers was, okay, hold on, let me redact these. I know y'all might have already seen them, but, and these numbers probably obviously don't belong to Celeste anymore, but just to be safe here. Okay. Did Mr. Rivas also indicate to you that he suspected that she, Celeste, had a 3rd phone number, which he did not know, that was purchased for her by a male? Okay, so this is that phone that the prosecutors have said David bought for Celeste. The detective said yes. The father of Celeste did suspect Celeste had 3 phones. She had a 3rd phone, but he did not know the number to that phone. Okay. Next question for the detective. Given the condition that we discussed with respect to the decedent's remains that you observed in the front trunk of that Tesla, did you ask Celeste's father for contact information for Celeste's dentist? Yes, I did. And did you provide that contact information for Celeste's dentist to the medical examiner? Yes. I provided that information to the investigator, Betsy Magdaleno, who was attempting to make identification of the unknown female. She was an unknown female at that time. Okay. Now, next question. Did Celeste's dad also provide you with the name of his missing daughter? Yes, he did. And what was her name? Celeste Abigail Rivas Hernandez. Okay, next question. Now, you also told us earlier that you determined that David had a local residence, that being the Doheny Place location. Is that correct? Yes. And did you serve a search warrant at that location? Yes. When did you do that? He said, I did that once Celeste was identified on the 16th of September. So she was found, the remains were found on the 8th. And it was about 8 days later when her remains were officially identified. When that happened, we served a search warrant the very next day, September 17th. So the very next day, yes. Your Honor, I have another exhibit to enter into the record. It's entitled, she said it's a Google Maps depiction or an image called Defendant's Residence in Hollywood Hills, 1368 Doheny Place. May be marked, please. People's Exhibit 19. This is a Google Maps image of David's home that he was living in at the time, the Doheny Place one. Okay. Next question the prosecutor asks to this detective. Now, looking at People's Exhibit 19, this Google Maps image of David's home, to the right of the center, there is a red arrow with a white home that appears to be upside down triangle in shape. Just above it, it says defendant's house. Do you see that? Yes. And is this the location where you served the search warrant on September 17th, 2025, detective? Yes, it is. Okay. So I want you to look to the bottom left corner where you see Bluebird Avenue. And it is upside down on this picture, but above that it says Tesla parked. Is that the location where you observed the Tesla that was previously parked on Bluebird that we looked at in some of these other photos that the senior lead officer had identified as a parking location at a parking location previously? Yes. And did that line up with the same location where from the Department of Transportation towed this vehicle at the beginning of September 2025? Yes. And this is when you served the location. Did you have assistance from any other detectives at the robbery homicide division of the LAPD? Yes. The investigator said we used our division along with several criminalists from our forensic science division. Okay, does that mean like from the laboratory? Yes. Okay, Your Honor, I have another photograph titled Defendant's Residence in Hollywood Hills, 1368 Doheny Place, Los Angeles. Can we please mark this as Exhibit 20? This is a photograph of David's house in Hollywood Hills, Doheny Place. Yes. Detective, do you recognize this location? He said, I do. And is that the location where you served a search warrant, September 17th, 2025? Yes, it is. And the front door of the entrance area, do we see that depicted in this photograph? Front door entrance area. Front door of the entrance area is depicted in Exhibit 20. States Exhibit 20. Yes. He says in the kind of like lower right-hand corner as you zoom in, there is a security gate. Behind the security gate is the door to enter the residence next to the garage. This is separate garage doors. Okay. And y'all have seen that before, right? There's like 3 separate garage doors, and then there's that front door you walk in to the left of the garage doors. Okay, so the garage door closest to the front entrance with this gate open, correct, in the photograph? Yes. This is a 3-car garage? Yes. Okay. Your Honor, I have another exhibit. This is People's 21. It's entitled LAPD Search Warrant of David's Doheny Place, address September 17th. So Beth now puts the search warrant onto the record as Exhibit 21. People's Exhibit 21. She says, okay, detective, can you please tell us what we're looking at? He said, yeah, you're looking at a straight-on shot of the front of the residence. You can see the address identified above the mailbox. You have the security door, the front door, and just a couple of feet behind that is the front door. Then the open garage door has a red Tesla that is backed inside of the garage. Did you determine who that red Tesla was registered to? Yeah, it was registered to Robert Morgenroth. The red Tesla belongs to Robert Morgenroth, or at least that's who it was registered to. Did you determine who that person was in relationship to David? Yes, I did, the officer said. Through our investigation, we determined that Mr. Morgenroth was kind of the manager or personal assistant of David Burke. Okay. Next question. When you go into the garage, is there a brick floor in that garage? He said, well, there is underneath. There are rubber mats over that brick floor. Okay, so like black rubber exercise mats? The detective said, kind of like interlocking, square-shaped, interlocking rubber mats. Okay, detective, did you collect any evidence from the interior of this residence? Yes. And what evidence did you collect from inside this house? He said, well, there was a bunch of evidence that was recovered by the forensic science team. Then there were additional devices, computer towers, cell phones that were recovered from the interior living area of the residence. We got all kind of evidence, this guy's saying. Okay, next question. Did you collect an iPhone from the upstairs den area. Okay, so now we're talking about an iPhone from the upstairs den area. He said, yes, I did. And was that in fact an iPhone 16 Pro that we saw that was connected to the Tesla, or was it some other phone other than the one that we were talking about earlier? He said, no, this is a different phone. Now we're talking about an iPhone 15. Okay, so it was not the iPhone 16 was the one David called Tranquilizer. And that one is missing. But this is a different phone. This is an iPhone 15. This was recovered from the upstairs den area of David's house. It was not the iPhone 16 Pro. This was an iPhone 15. Okay, Your Honor, I have two exhibits. I want them to be marked as People's Exhibits 30 and 31. They're titled the same. Defendant's iPhone 15 in second floor den, which is LAPD items 7 through 10, search warrant September 17th of 2025. Okay, fine. 30 and 31 are marked. Okay, great. Starting with Exhibit 30. This is a picture of the phone. Do you recognize what you see here, detective? He said, yes. What is this? He said, that's the upstairs den area where the phone was found. iPhone 15. Okay. And looking at that area where we've circled with yellow, is that the area where another iPhone belonging to the defendant was found? They make her rephrase the question. Okay. Is this the area where you found an iPhone? Yes. This is where we recovered an iPhone 15. Okay. So now looking at Exhibit 31, this contains two photographs. What do you see on those photographs? The detective said, well, you see an iPhone 15s in the center of the photograph inside a yellow box. And just to the right, you see a close-up of that blue iPhone 15. Okay. Did you determine whether it, in fact, or who that particular item belonged to, the iPhone 15? Yes, I did. Once the phone was examined under search warrant, we identified it as belonging to David. Okay, so there's an iPhone 15 that got found. Objection, no foundation. Okay, I'll take it subject to laying a foundation. If you want to lay a foundation for that, Miss Silverman. Silverman says, oh, sure. Now, this is day one. She's still in the power suit. She's still in the red power suit this day. She is on her stuff, okay? Day one. I'll rephrase, Your Honor. Detective, how did you determine that this particular item, this iPhone 15, belonged to the defendant, David Anthony Burke? He said, we determined it belonged to the defendant. Can you say you instead of we? Oh, okay, yes, okay. He says, I determined it belonged to the defendant based on numerous photos inside the phone, depicting David in selfies, depicting photographs of credit cards in his name, passports in his name, a driver's license in his name. There were pictures of all of that on the camera roll. There may have been a bank statement in his name as well. He didn't remember offhand. Judge says, all right, the court's going to allow testimony to remain, but you may cross-examine the witness regarding that, she says, to Blair Burke. Okay, prosecutor continues. Detective, that particular phone, was it associated with a phone number ending in 0571? He says yes. All right, and on the living room first floor area, the first floor area, not the upstairs den, did you find anything there behind a piano? Yes, I did, the detective said. There was a box. It was an unopened box. It contained a burn box. Okay, so it was an unopened box that had that burn cage in it. Okay, the burn cage. What's a burn box? I'm going to call it a burn cage because it was in a box. It was not open, so I'm going to call it a burn cage. A burn cage is a device that could be used to basically create a high enough temperature to burn items, whether it be stuff from the garden or documents, or it's kind of like a mini crematorium type. It's used to burn items to nothing. Okay, so it's used to incinerate something, Beth Silverman says. He says, yes. Okay, Your Honor. She said, I have a set of 3 photographs. This is a slide labeled as burn cage. Purchased from Amazon under alias Victoria Mendez, July 7th, 2025. May I have this marked as People's Exhibit 8? People's Exhibit 28, please. Burn cage. So this is the exhibit for the burn cage, a picture of the burn cage. marked as People's Exhibit 28. Okay. She goes on and asks more questions. The prosecutor says, looking at the photograph in the center first, is this a photograph of the item at the 1368 Doheny residence? The detective said, yes. The center picture is the unopened box. It was behind the piano of the burn cage. I'm sorry, what? This is item 28. Okay, thank you. Okay, sure. All right, cool. Looking close up at the label, who it was sent to, what does that indicate? He said, well, it indicates the name of Victoria Mendez with the address 1368 Doheny Place, with which later I determined that the Amazon records show you this Victoria Mendez address is associated with the purchaser as Mr. Burke. Okay, did you also find a tower computer in this residence? Okay, so we moved on from the burn box. Now we're, boom, right onto the tower computer. Now, I have a feeling Blair Burke is going to have a lot to say about this burn cage evidence, but we'll see. Okay, let me go back to Exhibit 28. If you were to look up this item online under Amazon, is this a photograph that shows what this burn cage can be used for? Yes. Okay. Let's go back to that tower computer. Was that submitted to your forensic services division for analysis? Yes. Okay. And was there an email address associated with this particular electronic device? He said there were multiple email addresses associated with that tower computer. One of them being the one we had referred to earlier, the falloit00112 at Gmail. Okay, detective, was there also another email associated with this item, this tower computer that contained another Gmail account that was used to purchase airline tickets? Yes. And was that Gmail address Brimy, Brimy? Yes. And were those airline tickets from a particular airline that you also wrote for? Yes. United Airlines. Yes. United Airlines specifically. Okay. And on that return is where that Brimy address was noted in the records? He said yes. Okay. Okay, next question. Was that purchase from United Airlines for two different individuals, detective? He said yes. There was the airline, United Airlines records reflected the purchaser being David Burke. And for Celeste and for David Burke. And where were they flying from? From Los Angeles, there was a trip to Texas and also a trip to London. Okay, so this is the trip to Texas, out of state, and a trip to London, out of the country. Okay, now did you also write search warrants for call detail records? Okay, so she's flying through the stuff, right? So we had a phone that they found in the search warrant. Now we know that there was a tower computer which allowed them to find airline tickets they found in the search warrant. There were also in the search warrant call details about iCloud records, records from Tesla, records from AT&T, various business records, Uber records, Postmates records, Home Depot records, Amazon accounts. He said, well, the Amazon was not written by myself. That was written under a federal subpoena. What? What? The Amazon records were not subpoenaed by him. That was written by the FBI, I guess. I mean, that was under federal subpoena? I told y'all the FBI was searching his house. I showed y'all those pictures. She blows right past that, huh? Okay, were those search warrants, though, that you were provided copies of? Yes. And you were also provided copies of the returns from those search warrants, meaning like what they got out of the search warrants? Yes. Okay, she's like, all right, now I want to put in another exhibit, People's 53. Your Honor, I have a DVD that contains business records for various items and the affidavits. May this DVD be marked as People's Exhibit 53? Okay, detective, did you also review the Amazon records in detail? This is from the federal subpoena. That's crazy. Yes. Did you note any purchases and deliveries of items that wound up being significant to your investigation regarding this Amazon stuff? Yes. And were these purchases and deliveries that were made under the name of the defendant or an alias? Alias. What was that name? Travion Davis was one of the aliases. Okay. They stopped for a lunch break. They go to lunch. Okay, they're back on the record. This is day 1, second half of the day. We have all counsel present. David is present. We have the second investigating officer at the counsel table with the people. Detective Farrell, yes, okay. All right. We have Detective Byers back on the stand. Sir, I remind you remain under oath. Mrs. Silverman, you may continue. Okay, thank you. Question. Detective, before we broke for lunch, we were discussing what you found from looking through the Amazon records you subpoenaed. Again, he did not subpoena these records. This was a federal subpoena. He already said that. He said, were done by federal subpoena. I'm not letting that one slide, Bethy Pooh. You did not subpoena. Relating to the defendant under the name of Travion Davis, and I think we talked about the burn cage, did you also find the defendant purchased any type of cadaver or body bags? Okay, so now we're on to the body bags. She's going through each of these little pieces of evidence, not little, but each piece of evidence that we have heard of here and there. 2 different cadaver bags. Two different cadaver bags that Travion Davis purchased. Your Honor, I have another exhibit. This is cadaver body bags purchased from Amazon under alias Travion Davis on May 5th, 2025. Can you please enter and mark this as People's Exhibit 25? Okay, detective, I'm showing you what's been marked now as People's 25. Do you recognize what you see here? Yes. And what is it? He said that is a picture of an Amazon cadaver bag that resembled the one that was seen in the trunk of the Tesla, but also on the Amazon purchase history. Okay, next question. Were those purchases the defendant made that were delivered to him on May 5th of 2025? Yes. Objection. This misstates the evidence. I'm sorry, on what basis? What's the misstatement? David's lawyer said, the misstatement that it was delivered May 5th. Okay, so what do you want to clarify? Oh, did you want to clarify? Okay, is that correct? Okay, so now it's back to Beth. She's rephrasing. Is that correct? These items were purchased and delivered May 5th? Yes. Your Honor, I have another exhibit. This is, quote, heavy-duty laundry bags purchased on Amazon under alias Travion Davis. Mark as Exhibit 26. Okay, yep, marked. Okay. Then they go on to the next question. She says, showing you Exhibit 26, do you recognize what you see here? He said, yes. Those are images of the purchase history for the 2 heavy-duty laundry bags that were purchased under the alias Travion Davis by the defendant. Okay, next question. Okay, and delivered, again, to the same address, this 1368 address we talked about, on all the other, as same address as all the other items? Yes. She puts forth another exhibit. This is Exhibit 27. It appears to be a picture of the inflatable pool purchased on Amazon under the alias Travion Davis. Exhibit 27, what is this? The detective said that was also indicated in the Amazon purchase records for an inflatable pool that was purchased under the name Travion Davis by the defendant. I believe that one was on May 3rd, though. Okay. The judge said, wait, that was the date of the purchase or the date of the delivery? The detective said, Your Honor, I think these were all, I believe, the date of purchase. Okay. Next question. And then was subsequently delivered to the same address, 1368 Doheny? Yes. Did you also note purchases on this same account under the same alias with respect to any chainsaws? He said yes. Actually, there were 2 different chainsaws purchased under the name Travion Davis. Both of those were on May 1st, 2025. So they're kind of working back with these purchases back in time. Your Honor, I want to put forth another exhibit. This will be People's Exhibit 23. 2 chainsaws purchased from Amazon, Travion Davis. Okay, Exhibit 23. All right, taking a look at this exhibit, what do we see? Okay. There's 3 images depicted here, the detective said. The one in the background, you can see the orange and black chainsaw. Then there's a small box below it. You can see Amazon identifiers of that particular chainsaw. Okay, well, when you say identifiers, what are you talking about? We're talking about an electric chainsaw, what, 16-inch? He said, yes, correct. Oof, I just got scalp chills thinking about a chainsaw. Ugh. Next question. When you served the search warrant in September 17, 2025 at Doheny Place, did you see a chainsaw in the garage as depicted in this photograph? Yes, 2 chainsaws. One was orange and black, the one you're circling, and then you can see the handle of a pink one, kind of in between that magnified box and the black bag. Okay, so there's orange and black and a red and black. Yeah, if you see the other one right there, it's pink. There's a handle of a pink one. Oh, okay. All right, next question. If we look over to the right, in People's Exhibit 23, does this depict the 6-inch handheld chainsaw that was also in the garage, left behind the larger 16-inch? Yes. Okay, and when you were in the garage area during the search warrants, did you also come across a blue inflatable pool like the one we just looked at Exhibit 27? Yes. Okay, and when you were in the garage during the search warrants, did you also come across a blue area book? Yes, it was not inflated, he said. The one you looked at was a blown-up version of that inflatable pool. Okay. So now in reviewing the various records that you received, did you also review records from Uber? Okay, so here's more evidence we're getting into at records from Uber. Yes. Did you find any purchases that were consistent with any of these purchases that we've already looked at on Uber through Uber? Yes. There were 3 purchases that we identified as being of some interest. There was a shovel that was purchased. I believe that was the day after Celeste died, April 24th, 2025. There was a 10-inch Makita chainsaw, which was purchased from Home Depot to be delivered by Uber Postmates on May 4th. Okay, so there's a shovel, a chainsaw, and a mop system. This is like a bucket and I don't know if it's a spindle. You kind of wash the mop in and there's a mop. So we just called it a mop system. Okay. Next question, Your Honor. I have another exhibit, actually, I want to put in. This is going to be the picture of the Makita 10-inch chainsaw, marked as People's Exhibit 24. Detective, I'm showing you People's Exhibit 24. Let's start with the photograph on the left. Is this a photograph of the object that you saw in your review of the records? Of a purchase from Home Depot of a Makita 10-inch chainsaw? Yes. Incidentally, next question. I know we talked about the red and black or the orange and black and the small pink 6-inch handheld saw, but did you happen to find this particular chainsaw at the location during the search warrant? No. We identified only the 2 we referred to earlier. This Makita chainsaw ordered from the Uber Postmates was never found. Okay, so there were 2 chainsaws in the garage, but not this one. So this is missing? Yes. Looking at the photograph to the right, what do we see here in Exhibit 24? Well, this is kind of like the mop system I referred to. It identifies a Libman Tornado spin mop, which consists of a bucket, kind of other buckets you rinse off in the mop, and then the mop itself. Okay, was there a particular email address associated with the purchases made through the defendant's Amazon account? Yes. And what email account was that? It was something about TratVD. I need to double check my notes. He can double check the notes. You're reviewing your notes. If you can look up, you can indicate what you're looking at to refresh your memory. Okay, he said, well, these are just notes I had personally taken of search warrants that I had done identifying email addresses associated with the defendant. And this one is TravionD00112. Okay, prosecutor says, next question, detective. And subsequent to the search warrant and additional investigation in April of this year, did you later arrest the defendant? He said yes. And what was his name as appearing in your arrest documents? Well, his name's David Anthony Burke. Do you see that person in court today? Yes. Can you identify him? He identifies him. Thank you. Where was he arrested from? He was arrested from Marmont Avenue in the Hollywood Hills. That was on April 16th, 2026. Okay, and did you and your partner have contact with David during the booking process as well? Yes, we did. Did you observe any markings? Uh-oh, we're about to get into that tattoo. Did you observe any markings on the defendant at the time of booking? Yes, I did. Can you describe for us what the markings were? Yeah. He had a tattoo of the name Celeste on his left ring finger. That's the marriage ring finger. He also had another tattoo. I think it said shush, like shh, S-H-H-H, on his ring finger, the right hand, I believe. Also, there was an additional tattoo on his palm. Remember the cross? An additional tattoo, a religious reference. I don't exactly remember what that one said, but I believe it was on the right palm also. Okay, so he had 3 tattoos on the hands, 1 on the palm, 2 on the fingers. All right, Your Honor, I have an exhibit here, Beth Silverman says. That was 3 photographs marked as Exhibit 1 and entitled Defendant Booking and Tattoos. May it be so marked. Okay, detective, starting with the photograph on the left, is this a photograph that was taken at the booking April 17th this year? Yes. And the photograph at the top right, it looks like red ink. Which tattoo are you referring to? That's the one that had the name Celeste. That was tattooed on the ring finger, the left ring finger. Okay, so looking at the photograph below, bottom right of Exhibit 1, this particular tattoo, it looks like it may be blue or black ink. What does that one say? Well, that one says shh. And then several periods after that. And remember, y'all, the red ink is very interesting to me because the invisible string, the red string theory, he makes that string red. So with Celeste, who I believe the entire Withered album is about, it's this red string everywhere. And then they have this kind of scripted writing of red string, red ink of her name. Is it raining? I think it might rain. Okay. The name Celeste, da-da-da. Okay, the other one said shush. Okay. Next question. When you reviewed those Home Depot records, did you also come across a spade? I think this is like a shovel. Yes. So she puts forth Exhibit 22, a spade purchased from Home Depot and delivered via Postmates the day after Celeste died. Detective, I'm showing you Exhibit 22. Is this a picture of the item as it corresponds to the purchase for a spade or a shovel delivered the day after Celeste died, April 24th? He said yes. He said, well, actually, I know it was purchased on April 24th, but I do not recall if it was delivered the same day. Okay, again, reviewing the Amazon records and alias Travion Davis, did you come across any purchases for a fireproof mat? Okay, so this is another piece of evidence here, fireproof mat. Yes. So she puts forward Exhibit 29, a picture of that fireproof mat. She says to the detective, can you tell us what we're looking at in these 2 photographs? He said, I did notice on the Amazon records a purchase of a fireproof mat. That is depicted in these photos. But it was also purchased under an alias, Travion Davis, through Amazon. Beth needs a moment, and she says, okay, I have no further questions. All right. Cross-examination. Okay, here comes Blair Burke, and it is going to be Berkey. Now, remember, we're hearing from the day 1 testimony. This is after lunchtime. This is the second half of the day. And this is Detective Byers, the one who testified about seeing Celeste's remains in that Hollywood tow yard. And he also went and did some search warrant stuff. Okay, so here's David's lawyer getting her shot to ask her questions and any follow-up she may have in the cross-examination. She says, Detective Byers, you've been the primary detective on this case from robbery homicide since September 8th, 2025, when you first were assigned to go to the tow yard. Isn't that right? He said, myself and my partner were the primary investigators, yes. Okay, and you testified earlier that you supervised and assisted in the processing of the scene at the tow yard with the LAPD Forensic Science Division, or was that the medical examiner on the September 8th? He said, on September 8th, that was criminalist. from the medical examiner's office. Okay. But that was to process the vehicle, the body bags, and the plastic bag you described in your testimony, was it not? He said it was to process the body and the bags, not the vehicle. Okay. Next question. The vehicle was processed the next day, September 9th, correct? That happened at Piper Tech, correct? Yes, correct. Okay. And detective, when you arrived at the tow yard, you arrived after the medical examiner investigators. Am I right in that? He said, no, you are not right. Incorrect. No. No. I arrived after West Bureau detectives, but I arrived prior to the criminalists. They got there after me. Oh, okay. But the crime log records indicate that you arrived at 15:25 Pacific time. Is that correct? So it'd be like 3:25. He said something like that, yeah. And you took over at the point you arrived from the Hollywood detectives? Yes. Okay, this part right here is going to be a point of contention. A point of interest to me throughout this trial, because there's a few windows of opportunity for some funny business to go on. And the 20 minutes, there's a window, right? That 20 minute, the Jayoma defense, 20 minutes that happened between the time when Celeste got out of that Uber and David texted her phone for the first time. We don't exactly at this point know what happened. That being said, there's some other stuff where there would have been time for some funny business to go on. For example, another example, the time between when Celeste supposedly allegedly lost her life and the time when she was allegedly dismembered, it was like 10 days. It was April 24th that she supposedly got unalived. And then it wasn't until May 5th that he supposedly started chopping and sawing and hacking. So what happened between April 24th and May 5th, there's, time for some funny business, for some, who knows, to go on. And this is another time right here for me. The 3 days when it was, the car was in the Hollywood tow, because there's a few pieces of evidence just don't add up to me. For example, the fact that the body had been in that trunk for so long, it was like partially liquefied. I know it was like massively decomposed, but like, it was in that hot trunk baking for months and months, and she still was able to have her like tattoos identified. The smell thing, right? The smell was so bad, the odor was so bad coming out of the car in the tow yard that they called the freaking cops and got a search warrant for the car. But she had died like 5 months or so, like months and months and months and months before. And nobody ever called the cops on that smelling ass car. I know it wasn't parked like next to anybody. It was kind of parked in like in a little bit of an abandoned way, but people walk all through those neighborhoods. It just seems like, I don't know exactly. Like if I were David's attorneys, which I would never, ever, ever, ever be. Like a woodpecker or something. Like right there. I'm banging on the side of my house. Okay. This time right here, like the time it was in this Hollywood tow, because I do not trust the LAPD. I really don't. I think they do help cover up all kinds of stuff for all kinds of people as long as you have enough money to pay somebody off. I really do. So I'm suspicious of what happened here. So you took over at the point you arrived from the Hollywood detectives. He said, we took over from the West Bureau detectives who took over for the Hollywood detectives. So Hollywood had the case first, then it went to West Bureau. And this is within, an hour or something. This isn't like that much. This isn't like that much time going by. But yeah, the very, very first people were the Hollywood tow. Then West Bureau shows up, and then once they realized it's probably a dead body, they had to call robbery homicide, and that's when they finally took over. I'm gonna have to holler at this bird out my window if you don't stop. Or she. How long were West Bureau detectives at the scene? He said, well, I think Hollywood detectives got a notification in the late morning, like 11 o'clock. Okay, so the Hollywood detectives got notified around 11 in the morning. So then, after that, the notification was sent to us. The notification was sent to West Bureau. They had been there a couple hours prior to our arrival. Okay, what happened in this couple hours? It don't take that long. This part is interesting to me. And it does show why Blair Burke, evil and probably going to hell as she may be, gets paid the big bucks. Because now I'm asking all kinds of questions. Wait a second. This went from Hollywood Tow to West Bureau, then from West Bureau to the Robbery Homicide Division. And I'm not saying David didn't do it. I'm not saying David's not guilty, okay? Anytime I raise suspicions or doubts, it's not to exonerate David. It's to be a little more inclusive of everyone who could have possibly had a hand to play in this, because for justice to happen, everybody got to pay for what they played. You know what I mean? Everybody got to pay for what they played. So for me, if there were any other things going on to perhaps put more blame onto David and less blame onto other people, I want to know about it. And Blair Burke is making me wonder, what were they doing with this car that was thinking like that for hours and hours before calling and getting these other officers on the scene? Now, maybe it would have had a good explanation, you know? Maybe they did call him and he was just, making the rounds, or somebody couldn't get somewhere, or whatever. I mean, maybe there's an innocent, obvious explanation here, but like, now I'm asking all kinds of questions. What happened during these couple hours? West Bureau detectives, look, he says Hollywood detectives got involved like late in the morning, like 11 in the morning. So then that notification went out to West Bureau. They were there on the scene for a couple hours before we arrived. Okay, question. Blair Burke, this is David's lawyer. Were West Bureau detectives there when the vehicle was opened and the bags were discovered? No. Okay, and when you arrived, the Tesla vehicle was already open, as you testified earlier, and the bags were unzipped? He said, the front trunk was open. The cadaver body bag was partially unzipped. Okay, who had opened those bags is a great question. I think Officer Parcia from Hollywood, so like the first guy on the scene, he opened it, probably with no search warrant. Okay, David's lawyer says, and just so we can be very clear again what we're talking about, with the court's permission, may I mark this photograph as Defense Exhibit A? This is a photograph the criminalist took on the day the body was discovered at Hollywood Tow Yard, September 8th, 2025. Yes, okay, so they mark it. David's lawyer says, Detective Byers, is this the bag that you identified earlier and the plastic bag that you identified earlier as the bags you saw when you arrived at the tow yard on September 8th, 2025? He said, look, just so there's no confusion, when I arrived, the bag with the blue, with the body parts in it, it was still in the car, underneath the cadaver bag. We didn't even know about that bag at that point. She said, okay. He said, so that secondary bag was not noticed until the cadaver bag was taken out. Blair Burke, David's lawyer, says, okay, but this bag, this picture, reflects after the body. The human remains had been removed from both bags. He said, well, the body itself, you talking about a body, that body ain't in this picture, what you showing me right now. Picture, the torso and the head, maybe. It's hard to tell from that lower picture whether that bag is open or closed or the contents are in there. I don't know what I'm looking at, really. She said, okay. Next question. When you first arrived at the scene, there were medical examiner investigators already interacting with that bag. Is that correct? Misstates the evidence. Objection. He already said they didn't come till after he arrived. Thank you. Okay. With regard, okay. The judge said, look, listen, there is a little confusing. With regard to the underlying facts, please state the facts as they've been testified to. Blair, stop. Don't be saying stuff he didn't say. Because you see what she did, right? He already told her up the page. He already said, no, I did not get there after the medical examiner. I got there after West Bureau or whatever, Hollywood, whoever it was. He said, then I got there. Then the medical examiner got there after me, the criminalist. They got there after me. So here's Blair Burke literally saying exactly opposite of that. When you arrived at the scene, there was already the medical examiner was already interacting. These investigators from the medical examiner were already interacting with the body bag. Isn't that correct? It's literally opposite of what he already testified to. So the judge is like, all right, you can ask questions, but like, don't state the facts in some way that they haven't actually been testified to, if you don't mind. Blair, oh, of course. Fine, I'll rephrase. Did you, when you first arrived at the car, was anyone there interacting with the vehicle or the zipper bag? No. He said no. Okay, did you, next question, detective, did you inspect the vehicle and the zippered bag? He said no. I looked at it. I physically looked at it. I never touched that vehicle. And by law, we don't touch the bodies of a decedent. That is for the medical examiner. They are the only ones with authority to do that. Okay, so next question. When you approached the vehicle, how long was it before the medical examiner investigators arrived? He said it was like less than an hour. Okay. And after the medical examiners arrived, you observed the medical examiner investigator further unzip the bag. See how she's saying further unzip? She's trying to keep it in the record like this bag had already somehow, some way been possibly tampered with. Why wasn't the bag all the way zipped up? Now, it could be the case just that it wasn't all the way zipped up ever. They never got it all the way zipped up. It could be the case that, David unzipped it when he wanted to come and sneak a peek for one last dance or whatever. We don't know, but she is really emphasizing, Blair Burke is really emphasizing the bag was partially unzipped. That might not be a big deal at all, but it does seem like she is kind of trying to emphasize it into a big deal. Once the cadaver bag was removed from the front trunk and placed on the side, that's when the second bag was observed and then removed from the vehicle and opened by the medical examiner. Okay, next question. Who directed, if you know, the bags to be removed from the vehicle at that time? He said, I don't remember exactly, but it would have been me or my partner. We were both there. I could have been the one that told him to remove it. I don't remember. Okay, and are you the one also who directed that both bags be taken into evidence for inventory and examination? He said, no. The cadaver bag was not taken into evidence after consulting with the criminal supervisor because the contents of the bag would not be able to be preserved. We didn't have anywhere to put all that liquid and that goo and that mush and the maggots. He said the liquefaction and decomposition would not allow for them to be stored. So, at the advice of the criminalist, we had them remove the handles to the bag and the zipper for processing. Okay, but it's your testimony that once the limbs were removed from the bag and the torso and the head were removed, that you did not take either bag into evidence? He said, we did not take the cadaver bag with the torso and the head, no. We took the body, we took the zipper, we took the straps. We did not take that cadaver bag. It was covered in maggots and goo. He said that was after consulting with the criminalist from LAPD. I don't recall if the secondary bag with the severed limbs was taken or not. I don't remember. David's lawyer said, all right, well, was there any testing that was performed before the bag was released or destroyed as to what you described as the body or cadaver bag? He said, no. As I said, after consulting with the criminalist, the best action to be taken was to remove anything that likely could have been touched by someone, like the handles. If you remember from that picture, there were several handles around that cadaver bag that were taken and the zipper. Blair said, okay, but was any other testing applied to your knowledge to the outside of the body bag? The plastic bag in terms of fingerprinting, misting of blue star, or phenolphthalein swabbing? He said, no. As I already told you, after I talked to the criminalist and described the decomposition and the condition of the body bag and the toll of the environment that had taken on the bag, it was just opted to just pursue the avenue of cutting off the components of the bag. Okay. But, Blair says, this is David's lawyer, if the medical examiner indicated that the black body bag or the cadaver bag, as you describe it, and the trash bag were collected, placed, and sealed in a biohazard double bag and taken in evidence, that would be incorrect. Sustained calls for speculation. Okay, let me rephrase. Blair says, detective, you also participated in the processing of the Tesla vehicle at Piper Tech the next day, didn't you? Yes. And did you search or take in any items of evidence from the Tesla vehicle yourself? He said, yes. We took the receipt. Remember the Ross Dress for Less receipt? I don't remember if we took the receipt, photographed it, and collected it, or if the criminalists collected that with all the other evidence they took from the vehicle. I don't remember exactly, but I think we took the receipt. Okay. Next question. Did you take any other physical evidence or coordinate with the criminalist to take any physical evidence? Objection, Your Honor, from Beth Silverman. At this point, there's been a lot of questioning, and I've let it go on so far, but I'm just going to start objecting now under the Penal Code Section 866. Judge said, I'm going to give her a little more leeway to the extent that the people brought in physical items of evidence, but yes, the preliminary hearing is not to be used for discovery. Blair, oh, of course not, Your Honor. Judge said, but to the extent you're asking about the items as it relates to what was brought up by the people, the court is going to allow it. But if it relates to discovery, that would also include either chain of custody or additional testing as far as being precluded under preliminary hearing, being used for discovery. You cannot be used in preliminary hearing for discovery. So I'm going to give you a little leeway, but just keep your focus on what was actually brought up by the prosecutors. She said, it's going to be brief, Your Honor. Court said, I understand, but keep it brief or not, still it cannot be used for discovery, whether it's brief or not. Of course, Your Honor, David's lawyer said. Judge said, keep it focused on what was brought up by the people in their direct examination. Don't be bringing up all this extra stuff. Oh, yes, Your Honor. Okay. She looks back to the detective. She goes back to her questioning. Next question. Were there any other items, physical items, that were taken into evidence when the car was processed on September 9th? This is the day after the body was found. This is when the Tesla is processed. Anything else, physical items taken from that car? No. He said, I don't really remember. Just the swabs from the vehicle. I don't remember what was taken. Okay, detective, but you testified earlier that you wrote a search warrant for the house, the Doheny Place house, and you executed that warrant September 17th, 2025, 1368 Doheny Place. Yeah. And you were the detective in charge of that search? He said, well, it was a big residence, so we had multiple supervisors and supervising the various searches that were going on. We had 3 floors of house, so there were teams moving about between the garage, the first floor, the second floor. Okay, and did you maintain any kind of crime log or record of all the detectives present and when anybody came and left? Did I keep a log of everybody that was there? She said, yeah. Or did any other officer keep a log of everybody that was actually arriving and leaving, or when they were arriving or when they were leaving? He said, well, there were detailed notes from the various detectives identifying who was searching where. So there are notes of that, but not a log per se. He said, I don't know if there's a crime scene log per se. No. Okay, but you and your partner also gave instructions to criminalists and detectives there for items that you wanted them to look for, possible tools, possible instruments or weapons that could have been used in dismemberment of any kind. He said, yeah. I mean, this was about a week in, so we didn't have a lot of information as to what exactly we were looking for other than we had a dismembered body. So there could be a variety of tools that might be able to be used for that. So yeah, I mean, we were just broadly like, yeah, look for stuff that could have been chop. Okay, but you gave specific directions about looking for tools and items that might have been used in a dismemberment? Yeah. And earlier you testified about a so-called burn cage that you had discovered at the home. Is that correct? Yeah. And did you personally identify the burn cage? He said, I mean, I saw it in the residence. It was an unopened box on the second floor of the residence near the piano above the stairway, so I did see it, yeah. Yeah, but at the time of the search, did you document? Ooh, come through, Steve Fisher. Where's Steve Fisher at a time like this? This is because Steve Fisher found this burn cage. I'm convinced of it. I'm convinced of it. Thank you to Nikki for the 440 jewels. Thank you to Rebecca for the 10 jewels and the thumbs up. Thank you to Variety for the 440 jewels. Thank you to Columbo for the jewels. Thank you to Rabbit. Shout out to Rabbit in the chat. Thanks so much to Rabbit for the $10 super chat. I was in there all day yesterday with her and the rest of the panel. It was so fun. Thank you to Variety Pirate for the Stay Hydrated. Thank you to Mags for the 10 jewels. Thank you to Hair by Mary Beth Aguiar. Oh, it is raining. Thank you for the 200 jewels. Thank you for the 1,000 jewels, Dreamhouse Nightmare. Thank you for the goat trophy. Thank you to Hetty for the 2 jewels, and thank you to Yvonne for the 2 jewels. Do we know if they ever searched the other one? No, I don't. I don't know if they did. So this is, I think, because Steve Fisher identified this burn cage. And Blair Burke, David's lawyer, is kind of like honing in on that, like, but you didn't pick the burn cage up? You were the guy in charge and you didn't say, oh, look, a burn cage. Let's get that. Let's test that. He said, well, I saw it. Okay, yeah, but the question is, at the time of the search, did you document in any way that you had discovered this burn cage? Yeah, I did. I documented it by having photographers take photographs of it. Yeah, but did you have it tested with phenolphthalein or Blue Star or any chemical reagents? Test the unopened box? Yeah. He said no. But your testimony is that you knew it was a burn cage on September 17th. When you executed the search warrant, you knew it was a burn cage. Yeah. David's lawyer said, Your Honor, if I may briefly, if I could impose on the Deputy District Attorney for Exhibit 28. Sure. Showing you what's been marked as Exhibit 28. Is it your testimony that this photograph was taken by LAPD or LAPD criminalists? On September 17th? Oops. Was it taken by them? Who took this photograph? This photograph was taken by LAPD? Who took this photograph? I think it was Steve Fisher. It's your testimony. This photograph was taken by your people. You directed this photograph to be taken of this burn cage. Blair, I think, is trying to show, like, they didn't do a thorough investigation, because even Steve Fisher came through. He's not even in charge of, like, making sure for sure this case gets solved, even though he kind of is, because he's been hired as a private investigator. He has less information than everybody else who's doing these investigations, actually authorized to do so by the government or whatever, and has all this subpoena power and all that, and he's identifying burn cages and taking pictures of them, but you not? Blair said, I just want to put it on the record. I mean, I'm paraphrasing here. She's like, putting it on the record. This is a picture of the burn cage. You're telling me you had this picture taken of the burn cage? He said, I believe so. And you personally identified this as a burn cage on that day. He said, I saw it that day. So he's not saying he personally identified it, though. And you did not take it into evidence. You did not collect it as evidence in this case. Correct. But you testified earlier, Detective, that, look, hold on. Let me be clear, Blair says. The burn cage you are talking about having discovered on September 17th, the day you did that search warrant, and you indicated that you later determined there was an Amazon order of some kind of burn cage? He said yes. And that burn cage was ordered all the way back in July 2025, right? Correct. Not before April 23rd, 2025, correct? Correct. And you also testified about the fact that during the search of Doheny, you found a number of chainsaws and electric saws. He said, yeah, 2 chainsaws. There was another electric saw, like a little sawzall, has a straight blade. But that was on the second floor above the garage. Those are the 3 items, 3 saws. You found 3 saws? Yeah. And those 3 saws, 2 were found in the garage and 1 was found on the second floor? Yes. I want to put a box around that. That seems like important to get the specifics, because we're hearing all about all these saws. 1's missing, 3 in the house, 2 in the garage, 1 inside the actual house. So there were 3 total saws. Electric saw, chainsaw, whatever you want to call the different ones. 2 were in the garage. 1 was on the second floor above the garage. And you had those items tested with Blue Star reagent and phenolphthalein. Yes. And all 3 of those items, the saws, tested negative for blood, or specifically chemoluminescence of phenol, meaning, like, when you spray the stuff and it makes the blood turn blue. Yeah. And they were negative. So they sprayed the blood, chemical, trying to find the blood on the chainsaws that they did find. There was no blood on those indicated. But remember, there is another saw that was ordered that never, my mouth is starting to hurt, There was another saw that was ordered that never was found. And I'm assuming that must be the murder weapon. Or the chop weapon. Okay. So did you have those chainsaws or those saws tested for DNA? He said, I don't remember. If the criminalist swabbed the handle for DNA, I really don't know. Okay, but in fact, you never collected those items at all as evidence in this case, did you? Yeah, that's correct. Once the tests were negative for blood, they were not collected. Because obviously they weren't the ones used to chop. Blair says, yeah, but having directed that items could be possibly connected to dismemberment, you also did not collect those items for any testing as to tool marks or any kind of marks on the saw blades that could have been consistent with dismemberment? He said, well, when they were tested by the criminalist and determined not to have human blood, it's not like the cops are going to take everything in people's houses. Speaking of criminalists, if those chainsaws had been used to dismember a human body, they would not have been able to clean those saws off to a point where there were no remnants of human blood. So there was no blood on the saws. They weren't used in the murder or the chop. He said, but there could be DNA, right? She said, but there could be DNA, couldn't there? He said, no. Maybe on a handle, but not on a dismemberment blade or a chainsaw. She said, so no DNA testing was ever performed on any of these 3 saws at the house? Your Honor, I'm going to object, Beth Silverman says. It's been asked and answered twice now. Okay, so she now moves on to the next exhibit. This is Exhibit B. It's a picture of a photograph taken, I guess, during the search warrant, September 17, 2025. Detective. The chainsaw. The 2 chainsaws you described earlier, these are the chainsaws in the back of the photo with the orange color and black base with the cord hanging off. Yeah, that's one. But then there's a pink one right next to it where you can see, yeah, right there. Okay, all right, next question. At some point during the course of your investigation, you examined the make and model of the chainsaw ordered from Amazon. You testified to that earlier? Yes. Did you match the make and model of a chainsaw with this black and orange chainsaw? Yes. And did you do the same for this pink handle that you see that you testified earlier was a chainsaw also? Yes. And you matched that order to the chainsaw that had been ordered on Amazon, right? Yes. And after you completed your search of the home, you had, along with the criminalist at the scene, collected a significant number of items of potential biological evidence and physical evidence. Isn't that right? Yes. And you testified that you collected and booked into evidence a number of cell phones and computer devices. Yes. Did you personally collect those items? Or did someone else? He said, I personally did not collect those items. Who collected them? Silverman objects. She says, this is too vague. What are you talking about? Can we get something specific? Okay, let me rephrase. Detective, you testified earlier you collected 4 cell phones when you conducted the search. Is that correct? He said, no. I think I testified to 1 cell phone. There were multiple that were recovered from that residence during the search. Do you remember how many phones were recovered from the residence? He said, I think there was 2 in the garage and 2 upstairs. Then there were multiple laptops and a computer tower. And then like an Apple computer with a monitor included, like an all-in-one, like an iMac. Okay, next question. The 1 cell phone you testified about earlier. You said it was a cell phone recovered from the 2nd floor on a coffee table. He said, yes. So it was the top floor. You have the garage and up some stairs to the 1st floor. And then the next floor is where the den, it was in the bedroom where that iPhone 15 was found. Okay. Your Honor, I want to mark Defense Exhibit C, iPhone 15 Pro Max. Okay. And it's a photo, correct? Yeah, photo. Okay. All right. They got the photo. So Blair Burke, this is David's attorney, says to the detective, this is the same iPhone to which you testified earlier about having discovered it on the 2nd floor coffee table. Isn't that correct? Yes. And how did you identify it as an iPhone 15? He said, well, upon bringing another search warrant for the device, it was identified by cell phone extraction with those indicators. Okay, but that cell phone extraction, was that warrant prepared after you recovered the phone? Yes. But you had no personal knowledge of the contents of the phone. You didn't open it in any way at the time. And you didn't look and identify any material on the phone when you were just doing the search warrant, right? That is correct, he said. Okay, but when you wrote a series of search warrants after you discovered that iPhone 15 at the residence, isn't that right? He said, yeah. He said, wait, is your question, did I write multiple search warrants for that same iPhone? No, she said, related to the discovery of that iPhone. He said, I don't understand the question. She said, let me rephrase. Detective, is it true that after you did the search at Doheny, at the house, is it true that after that search, you wrote a search warrant for Celeste Rivas Hernandez's iCloud information based on an iPhone that had been discovered at Doheny? He said, no, that's not true. I wrote Celeste's iCloud search warrant based on her descriptors. I've also written various iCloud phone numbers for her and email addresses identified through the investigation that belonged to her. Blair said, yes, of course. Okay, but one of those search warrants, you filed a sworn affidavit indicating in your application for that warrant that on September 17th, a search warrant was served, and one of the items recovered was an iPhone 15 Pro Max, right? Didn't you say that? You were trying to get a search warrant for this iPhone 15 Pro Max, and in the affidavit you had to fill out for it, you said, I want a search warrant for the phone. Reason being, I found this phone when I was doing a search of the house. This phone identified the email address of Abigail Blue, 977 at iCloud, which is believed to have belonged to the victim, Celeste. Is that correct? He said, I don't know. What date is that warrant? There is no date on the face of the warrant. If it would refresh your recollection, I'm happy to show it to you. Okay. So on February 12th, this year, 2026, he said, that's when I wrote this warrant, inquiring about that email address. She said, yeah, and you represented in that warrant, in the affidavit, that an iPhone 15 Pro Max had been found at the residence. Isn't that right? He said, I didn't read the whole warrant, but I referenced the iPhone devices being recovered, certainly at that residence, yes. Okay, but you represented that the iPhone 15 Pro Max was a phone you believed belonged to Celeste. He said, I don't remember referencing that specific iPhone with her now. It says that email address belongs to her. It doesn't say the phone. Okay, but, okay. She shows him something and she goes, does that refresh your recollection? He said, no, not if the question is still, did the phone belong to her? All I know is the iCloud address that belonged to her. David's lawyer said, if the question is, did you swear in the search warrant that one item recovered was an iPhone 15 Pro Max and identified the email address of Abigail Blue, which is believed to have belonged to her? Your Honor, I'm going to object at this point. This is argumentative. This is conflating two different items, and I think the detective already answered the question. The judge said, well, on relevance grounds, is this even relevant? What is the offer of proof going into this? Blair finally has to say, this David's lawyer, she finally has to give away a little bit of part of the defense. She says, well, Your Honor, this phone, we believe. We think, and we're assuming, that the prosecutors are going to allege that there was material found on the phone, and that the phone, we think that the prosecutors are going to say, belonged to David Burke. But that's not true. So we want to get out in front of it and say it wasn't David's phone. So anything found on it wasn't for David. It was for Celeste. The judge said, okay. And Blair said, we believe this is directly relevant. The judge said, okay, at this point, the people haven't even brought up that particular phone yet. So that may go to count 2, but I don't see how that's relevant at a preliminary hearing. She said, at this point, as it relates to what the people have actually brought up, which is the only thing you're supposed to be able to do this cross-examination on relevance grounds, the court's not going to allow you to keep questioning about this iPhone 15. You're trying to do discovery during a preliminary hearing, and we already said you can't do that. If it becomes relevant for count 2, and you want to recall the detective back up, I will certainly allow you to do that. Blair Burke, David's lawyer, said, thank you, Your Honor. Okay, next question. Blair goes back into her questioning. After the search of the home at Doheny Place, was there a release of the scene? There was no preservation once you left on the evening hours of September 17th. Isn't that right? Yes. He said, I do not remember if we left after midnight, if it went into the 18th or not. But after we left and completed our search, the scene was released to the owner. Okay. And in your testimony about the items ordered, the chainsaws, the body bag, the laundry bag, the shovel, all those items you determined were ordered on or after April 24th. Isn't that correct? Yes. None of these items were ordered prior to that day. Isn't that correct? Correct. All right. The judge said, okay, look, just to be clear, because I'm making myself a note as to you wish to recall the detective if it comes up later. We're talking about the iPhone 15 found on the second floor of the living space at the Doheny address, correct? That you wish to challenge? As I understand it, this is the judge talking. As I understand, there was some discussion as to whose phone with which email address associated to it at this particular time. Am I just understanding correctly that is what you are identifying? Yes, Your Honor. Okay. If we could have this witness subject to recall so I could inquire. Absolutely. Okay. Thank you. All right. I'm just making myself a note. All right. Redirect. All right. Beth Silverman wants to do a redirect. She said, yes, Your Honor. I have a photograph of the back end of the black Tesla called Defendant's Tesla at Hollywood Tow Yard. May it be marked as People's 13? Yes. Okay, wait. Okay, so she's doing the redirect. So now it's the prosecutor back up. She's already done her first round of questions. David's lawyer has done her first round of cross-examination. And so now this is on redirect. The prosecutor, Beth Silverman, is back up. One photograph, detective, I forgot to show you. Looking at the back of this vehicle, is that the condition that you found the vehicle in? At least the back end of it as depicted in this photograph when you went to the tow yard in September? Yes. So it appeared it was covered heavily in dust? Yes. And the same license plate. I know you mentioned a Texas license plate. Is this the same exact license plate that we saw with respect to exhibit where it was parked on Bluebird all the way back in May? Yes. All right, nothing further. And Blair Burke, David's lawyer, gets the opportunity to do her recross. So she said just briefly, she wants that exhibit. Okay, People's 13. Yep, okay. This is David's lawyer back up again. She wants to ask a couple more follow-up questions. She says, Detective Byers, am I correct that there was extensive damage that you identified on the back of that vehicle in the tow yard September 8th, 2025? He said, yeah, it's kind to the at the bottom of the picture, but the rear bumper was warped and there was some damage kind of by the license plate. Okay, next question. To your knowledge, was the vehicle taken into evidence after it was taken to Piper Tech? Was it impounded and taken into evidence from the tow yard? Yeah. And am I correct that no testing was performed on the trunk or the damaged areas of that vehicle on the exterior of the vehicle? He said, I would imagine there would not have been any testing on the exterior of the vehicle, no. But you know of no testing that was performed. Correct, yes. It was photographed, and I think that would be about it. In fact, Blair Burke goes on, you released the vehicle after that to be destroyed, didn't you? He said, no, I didn't release it to be destroyed. We released it to, just into the wild. I mean, I'm with her on this one. Why did they just release that Tesla into the wild? They didn't keep it into evidence? Well, I'm going to object to that, Your Honor. If she could just let him answer the question before she makes a comment. She said, I'm also objecting to the response she just made, which is argumentative. The judge said, well, I'm going to allow the witness to finish his answer. You can finish. He said, I never authorized the vehicle to be released into the wild, but I have authorized it to be released to a registered owner or a legal owner. Okay, next question. This is from David's attorney to the detective. Did you ever notify David or the registered owner of the vehicle? He said, well, as required by the law, we mail out the impound notice that they're released to the owner. So, to answer your question, yeah. When did you do that? He said it would have been the day or the day after it was finished being processed. Blair Burke said, but it was no longer available after the day you did that for any kind of chain of custody examination, right? Objection, Your Honor. The prosecutor objects. Those are two different things, and I don't know what I don't understand the question regarding a chain of custody. Neither does the witness. He said, once the vehicle is released, there is no more chain of custody. What's out of our custody? It's out of your possession. Okay. Thank you, detective, said David's lawyer, Blair Burke. She said, and detective, finally, when you describe those items at the house that you say were ordered on Amazon, you didn't find during your search any shovel at the house. Isn't that right? No. Didn't find a shovel. And did you search anywhere outside the house? Or just the interior? Well, we went around the house as well. Where did you go outside the house? The entire house. There was a swimming pool in the backyard. There's not much to check there. And then there's various areas of grass and things like that. We just kind of walked through. Okay, but did you, during your search of the house, discover, I think you testified, fireproof mats at the house? He said, never found that. Okay, and earlier when you testified that you had discussed with the criminalist about the destruction of the 2 bags that the human remains were found in, right? The destruction. Who was that criminalist? He said, oh, I don't know. I don't think I ever mentioned the destruction of the bags. It was more like not being able to collect the bags and preserve them. And it was a senior criminalist by the name of Julia Wilkinson. David's lawyer said, okay, cool, great, nothing further. All right, nothing further from the prosecutor. Cool, you can step down, sir. You are subject to be recalled back up here. People, you may call your next witness. The people call Ben Gregor. Okay, we're moving on to the next witness, everybody. Lock in. Buckle up. We got another witness coming through. He swears in. He spells his name, Benjamin Gregor. Miss Jinness. Miss Jinness is, we've heard her name before. She's also, I believe, representing Robert Morgenroth. So I think this is kind of like a label lawyer type of thing. According to reports, she represented Morgenroth as well. She's the one that Morgenroth was in the hall saying, I didn't think I needed to call. I didn't think I needed to say anything. I just wanted to get back on the tour. He was talking to his lawyer when TMZ reporters found him like saying that, or heard him saying that in the open parts of the court hallway or whatever. He was saying those words to this lawyer. Okay. Benjamin Gregor, called on behalf of the people as a witness, was sworn and testified as follows. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Okay, so the person asking these questions is Beth Silverman, this is the prosecutor. Who's your current employer? I am self-employed. I own a record label, or a distribution company, I should say. And I also have a small business management practice that I still run. Okay, so he owns a distribution company and a small business management practice. So he's a business manager type of guy, but he also is in the music industry specifically as a record label distribution company owner. Okay. But when you say you run a small business management company, what's your typical clientele? This industry guy says my typical clientele has been for the last 3 or 4 years more record label predominant. Say, a lot of back-end finance work, royalty analysis, tracking income and expenses related to different projects that artists are conducting, whether it's albums, mixtapes, EPs, single releases, music videos, things like that. On the business management side, it's a predominantly in the day-to-day bookkeeping and financial matters for artists. Touring musicians, predominantly the record table stuff. So artists involved in the music industry? Yes. Thank you. And prior to this, were you employed by a company called Mogul Vision? Yes, I was. I was employed by Mogul Vision Partners. Yeah. What kind of company is Mogul Vision? We're a management company. Okay, so wait, hold on. We are a management company. Are is present tense. So you were employed or you are employed? Is affiliated or was affiliated? Were you employed? I was employed, past tense, past tense. This all indicates he's no longer employed. What kind of company is is present tense Mogul Vision? We are present tense a management company, music management company. Music or talent management? Correct. Which one? It's a either or question. Music management or talent management? Correct. Okay. And how many years were you employed by Mogul Vision? He said about 1.5 years with Mogul Vision Partners. I had worked with Mogul Vision, Mr. Marshall's other company, for several years. So we're working with 2 different companies here. Okay. So this may become important. 2 different companies. Mogul Vision and Mogul Vision Partners. Okay, so he had worked 1.5 years with Mogul Vision Partners, but he had worked with Mogul Vision for several years. And they're both Mr. Marshall's company. Okay, I thought you said with his other company. He said, yeah, so he had Mogul Vision, LLC, and then he had Mogul Vision Partners, which is where he did the full music management company that he built. Okay, so what years were you employed by Josh Marshall with Mogul Vision? Well, I met Josh in mid 2017, and I had started working with him and his artists at that point in time while I was working at a company called Citron Cooperman. Okay, this is a big finance, like an accounting firm, Citron Cooperman, which was an accounting firm that I was employed at that point. And then it wasn't until 2020 where Josh and I started working together as I went out, self-employed. Okay, next question. Was that with Mogul Vision LLC or Mogul Vision Partners? He said that was with Mogul Vision LLC. Okay. Next question. When did you begin working with him, the company, Mogul Vision Partners? He said, I think we formed Mogul Vision Partners in 2024. Okay, 2024. Okay, and you said you were there for about 1.5 years or 2 years? Yes. So that would have been 2024 through 2025 or maybe even into this year? Yes, it would extend into top portion of this year as well. Okay, so all times relevant. He worked with these Mogul Vision Partners during the time Celeste was alive, during the time Celeste died, and after Celeste died, all the way through to the beginning of this year. When did you stop working for Mogul Vision Partners? March 2026. And why is that? Josh, the owner of Mogul Vision, moved on to other endeavors. So they're laundering out this handler onto some other project. In my opinion, that's what it looks like to me. And he wasn't conducting any business under Mogul Vision Partners anymore. Okay, so what was your title at Mogul Vision Partners? I was senior finance manager. I forget the specific title, but it was like a senior finance manager thing. Would it have been director of finance, perhaps? Yeah, that's correct. Okay. Was there anybody else in the finance area within the company? No. How many people worked at this company? 3 people. Two people. 4. Okay, what? Myself, Nathan Evans, and remember we see on fast forward now, these things that we're reading right now are from day 1, but we do get reference to Nathan's fiance later on when Celeste allegedly texted David that she'll tell, I have Nathan's fiance's number. Okay, Nathan Evans. How many people worked at this company? He said it was me, Ben Greger. That was 1, me. Nathan Evans. He had an assistant, Karen Marshall. There was also obviously Josh Marshall. He had an assistant. So Josh Marshall's assistant's last name was the same last name as him. Is Karen related to Josh? And then, of course, who could forget? Robert Morgan Roth. Is Karen his sister? Yes. Like a half sister. Okay. So who worked at Mogul Vision Partners? It was Robert Morgan Roth, Josh Marshall, the assistant Karen, Nathan Evans, and this guy Greger. So 5 people. The core people on the payroll, that was it. Okay. How many clients as the director of finance did you handle? He said 2 people. Ruby Rose and David. That was it. Ruby ended up going in a different direction. The company was really just managing David at that point. Okay, do you recall testifying at the grand jury in February of this year? Okay, so now we get, information that this guy was a grand jury witness. This guy, Ben Greger. He said, yeah, I remember I testified. Do you recall testifying that you were hired through Mogul Vision to be sort of a financial advisor to all things David? And I asked you during the grand jury proceedings, so you only worked with David and you said only David, right? He said, well, yeah, I mean, I had worked only with David. But what about this Ruby? Well, Ruby is like a come and go artist. I didn't really do much of anything with her at that point in time. Okay, so you really only had one client at Mogul Vision. That's correct. And that would be the defendant, David Anthony Burke, right? Yep. And do you see him here in court today? Yes, I do. Can you identify him? He points over to him wearing the orange jumpsuit with glasses. So who was Mogul Vision Partners owned by? Joshua Marshall. Okay. Would you say that he was a friend of yours or still a friend? I would say we're colleagues. I wouldn't say we're like deep friends or really friends, no. But you did describe him as a friend when you testified for the grand jury in February, did you not? Yeah, I did. You know, at the beginning we had like a long-standing relationship with each other. We were friendly. I did consider him my friend. Okay, but what about today? Still today? I think now I would consider him more of a colleague than anything else. Okay, when was the last time you spoke to him? Sometime at the end of May, maybe the beginning of June this year. And what did y'all talk about? Oh, just catching up. We didn't really get a chance to find the time to discuss much of anything in detail. Was this a get together or by phone? No, just by phone. Okay, well, how long did y'all catch up for? 2 or 3 minutes. And what was the nature of your conversation? Objection, Your Honor. David's lawyers are not liking these questions. Relevance. The judge said, I'm going to give a little leeway here and let her keep asking. Did you talk about this case? He said, me and Josh Marshall? No, we did not. Not at all. I've not talked to Josh Marshall about this case since March or April of this year. Josh refused to have any conversation about this case. So the owner of Mogul Vision, David's record label and management company, David's management company, did not want to talk about this case to the finance guy. How often do you speak with Josh? He said the last time I talked to him was March, April of this year. Before that, when was the last time you talked to him? Maybe once a month. But he's also represented by your same lawyer, Miss Jan Ness, isn't he? Yes. What was your salary paid? Oh, wait. Do we skip a page here? Who's asking these questions? It's saying by Miss Burke. I don't think it's Burke asking the questions. What was your salary? $100,000 a year? Whoa. Salary paid by Mogul Vision was $100,000 a year, the money guy. Did you also get bonuses? Yes. I got an additional $200,000. So his salary is $100,000, but he got a $200,000 bonus. So double his salary and a bonus. What? Do you remember testifying at the grand jury you actually had gotten $250,000 in bonuses? He said, yeah, I do recall that. Was that accurate or was it the $200,000? He said the 200 is more accurate. Sorry. She said, no apology needed, but I just wanted to make sure we're clear on what we're talking about here. I mean, $50,000 is a big difference. What do you expect to make, if anything, in 2026 from this business? You said you were still working for Mogul Vision as of late March this year. Hold on. I understand this is going to be motive or bias. It may. Well, this is a probable cause hearing, the judge said. I just need an offer of proof as to why we're going in this direction at this stage. She said, Beth Silverman said, it's both of those two things that I just mentioned. So let me just correct this here because this is confusing. It's not Burke that's asking these questions right now. This is a typo by the court reporter. It's Silverman. The court will grant a little leeway. If you want to clarify as it relates to business. Okay. Okay. Next question. Given that if you want to clarify as it relates to the business concerning, it almost looks like the judge already decided on day one the case was going to be proceeding. She said, if you want to clarify as it relates to the business concerning the defendant as opposed to something else since this case is proceeding. Given that you, okay, next question. This is by the prosecutor. Given that you said you only had one client at Mogul Vision, that being David, how much money, if any, do you expect to make this year through Mogul Vision? Objection. The judge said, I'm going to allow this question because it goes to bias and motive. But as it goes to bias and motive, that would indicate how much money the witness might have been making with his relationship, as opposed to some other unnamed client moving forward. So if you want to clarify this whole year, which encompasses far more than simply with Mr. Burke. Okay. Beth said, all right, fine. I'll rephrase. I'm only interested in the work that he did for the defendant, David Anthony Burke. This includes his family as well. The judge said, okay, well, if you want to clarify your question and answer only as it relates to how much you expect to make based on your relationship with David or his family, okay? Ben Greger said, yep, got it. Objection, I don't know what the question is that's pending. Is there a question pending? The judge said no. I just clarified that anything related to how much he expects to make is limited to his relationship only with David or David's family. He said, all right, can you repeat the question because I don't know what the question is? Sure, thanks. Okay. Here's the question. How much, if any, money do you expect to make this year, 2026, regarding your work through Mogul Vision for the defendant, David, or any of his family members related to his business? He said, I'm not making any additional income from Mogul Vision. Are you still owed any money? No. From your work with David or any of his accounts? No. So now you have been paid. All the money you had previously testified was outstanding? Okay, so this is interesting. We're getting a little bit of a peek behind the grand jury curtain. He testified previously that he was owed money. David hadn't even paid him out. He hadn't been paid from Mogul Vision. But now he has been paid. Okay, thank you. What is your relationship? Ooh, here we go. What is your relationship with Robert Morgenroth? Well, since this event had occurred, Rob started a travel agency more full-time. Well, I wonder if he's helping 14 and 13-year-olds travel with artists as a travel agent. I talk to Rob pretty regularly. He's worked on a couple other touring artists that I've had through different record labels, booking tour travel, hotels, airfare. Okay, so you're still in contact with him? And it also appears in some type of business relating to other clients? Ben said, yeah, but not, to clarify, they're not theoretically my individual clients. I'm working with Rob. Rob was looking for other businesses to book through his travel agency. And I had known a couple people that were going on tour. Okay, got it. So next question, would you consider him a friend? Yeah, I consider Rob to be friendly, yeah. Did you know him prior to your work with Mogul Vision? No. I was introduced to Robert Morgenroth through their work with Mogul Vision. Okay, when did you last speak to him? That was about a week ago. So first she asked about Josh Marshall and how often he speaks to him and whether he thinks he's a friend. Josh seemed to not really be talking to him. He's not really calling Josh a friend, but Robert Morgenroth he spoke to much more recently, and he's kind of considering him a friend, and he's kind of still sort of working with him. So it seems like he's still on better terms. This guy, Ben Greger, is on better terms with Robert Morgenroth than he is with Josh Marshall. When did you last speak with Robert Morgenroth? It was about a week ago. Did any of that relate to anything regarding this case? He said, yeah. We talked about this case. Yes, we did. Me and Robert Morgenroth. What was the nature of your conversation about this case? He showed me 2 pieces of mail that his mom had received in relation to, I guess, some wiretapping or information related to his records being subpoenaed. And I wonder if this is federal. These federal, because 2 pieces of mail. Wiretapping is going to always be federal from what I understand, because it's interstate. He had shown me 2 pieces of mail. So is it like 1 piece of mail was the wiretap and 1 was his records, where his mom had received mail for him regarding wiretapping and records being subpoenaed. That was it. And what was his role at Mogul Vision while you 2 were there? Robert Morgenroth. He was the day-to-day manager. He was living in Los Angeles with David at that point. He had moved from Florida to Los Angeles to be more on the ground with David. Yes. So he was a handler. Robert Morgenroth was like a handler type. Hollywood Handler, LLC. Robert Morgenroth, the day-to-day manager on the ground with David. And lived with him. Okay, next question. As the director of finance, how much was... Okay, so he's asking him, look, you were the director of finance, right? Like you know how much people got paid. How much was Robert Morgenroth getting paid every year to work with David? $250,000, $250,000 a year. What about bonuses? I think he got maybe $50,000 or $75,000 bonus. So more than $300,000 total. Okay, next question. Describe in your role as the financial manager or business manager of David, what it is you did to earn your salary. Well, how'd you earn all that money? What were you doing over there? He said, sure, I predominantly handled all the accounts payable related to David's businesses. Most of the work that was conducted was around touring, as the touring business early sort of kicked off, and a lot of logistics in terms of sourcing insurance, handling crew payroll, things like that. So you did tour financing? Yes. Okay. Salaries of everybody involved in the tour? Did you handle that as well? He said, well, I mean, we had employee agreements for each of the crew members. Per that agreement, it then stipulated what they were going to get paid. Okay, but how about estate management, David's estate? Were you also involved in estate management regarding all of his finances? He said, well, we had helped him set up a trust. That was it. It got passed onto a different attorney to do all the paperwork and get everything sorted. Is that the Thorn Rose Trust? Oh man, everything is rose and thorn. Yes. Did you begin working with David before 2024? Okay. Did you begin working with Josh before 2024 when you said you started working for Mogul Vision? He said, yeah. We started working together in 2023. I was assisting Josh in what he wanted to accomplish through the management company. So he was helping Josh to set up this kind of like 360 all-in-one handling, young artist management company to bring it all in-house. You were advising him, though, regarding finances. He said, not specifically to finances, no, but somewhat, kind of like costs related to whatever he was incurring at that point in time. But when did you first meet him? April 2023 in Los Angeles. He already had a business entity set up at that point, and that company was D4vd Entertainment, LLC. Did you also work with his mother? Okay, so now enters the mother, finally. His mother, who was at that time his personal finance director. Okay, the mother is the momager, all right? Colleen Burke, Momager, LLC, okay? Was there a salary that was paid to the mother, Colleen Burke, for her work as head of D4vd Entertainment, LLC? Yes, $75,000 a year. She was entitled to handling all of the approvals for bills that needed to be paid, any conversation we had related to the household requirements, whether it was improvement or a utility bill that needed to be handled. And that was with respect to the 2 homes David had purchased. The one was in Cypress, Texas, and the other was outside Houston. You visited both of those homes in Texas? The finance manager said, yes, I did. Okay, next question. In addition to the approval of payroll and bills, did Colleen Burke, David's mom, also handle the day-to-day bookkeeping? Yeah, she did. She was supposed to. Was she qualified to do that? Or did you have to assist her? We had to assist her at the beginning. Okay, but you explained to her or taught her how to do this job? He said, yeah, through the normal bookkeeping on QuickBooks, yeah. And besides David's LLC, how many other entities did he own? 2 others. Skull Rose Merchandising, okay, so that's the merch company, Skull Rose, and Headspace Publishing, and that must be his publishing company. So Headspace, Skull Rose, and Thorn Rose. Headspace Publishing was for the music publishing, for advances on royalties. Okay, so these are if they advanced money to him on royalties, they would give him money that he would then have to pay back. It's called an advance. And all that would happen through this company. He received a publishing advance. It's still unrecouped, so he hasn't paid it back. Did you testify previously that account is worth $3 million? Yes. And you mentioned his merch company? Yes. Skull Rose Merchandising Company. Is that through Bravado? He had a Bravado deal. Yes. Is that under the auspices of the umbrella of Interscope Records or Universal Music Group? He said, I think that's their merchandising entity. Yeah. And how much money did he receive in advances? $1 million. So he had received $1 million actual dollars. Okay, what's the value of the Thorn Rose Trust y'all helped him set up? Total value with all properties, I don't know, 1.2, 1.5 million. I really don't have a specific gauge on it at this point. I don't have a specific valuation of what the assets of those 2 homes could be worth today, but the trust encompasses and holds the 2 homes. So I don't know, whatever they're worth. Okay, so back at the time when you were handling them, the trust was like 1.2 to 1.5 million? Yes. And did you actually sign the trust documents with the defendant? He said, I brought the paperwork, but I did not sign anything. Who is the sole owner of that Thorn Rose Trust? David Burke. So he's the owner of the trust, but the parents are trustees. So they have financial interest, interestingly, here as well. When was the last time you saw the defendant before today? He said, I don't know. The last time I saw David, like 2024. I visited Houston. I was seeing another client of mine, and David's, I wonder if it's Meg the Stallion. Who lives in Houston? David's family had just purchased the Hempstead house, and I had gone over to the Cypress house and helped him move some boxes into the new house, and then we had lunch. Okay, when was the last time you spoke with David? He said, I think I asked him for a Chase Bank text code, maybe sometime in the end of July, right as the tour was about to kick off, August 2025. And you have had no contact at all in any manner since then? No. Not within David Burke, no. How did you usually communicate with David? By text? He said, yeah, predominantly it was through text. Okay, but at some point, did you switch to communicating with him through an encrypted app? No, I did not. Okay, interesting. He said, we never switched to Signal or nothing like that, no. Did you testify to the grand jury that you changed to using encrypted apps? He said, I had used applications like Signal and WhatsApp, but that was predominantly through Josh and Rob. That wasn't with David at all. Okay, but did you switch to using encrypted apps such as Signal and WhatsApp to communicate with Josh Marshall and Robert Morgenroth after the news came out about a deceased body being found in the front trunk of his Tesla? So who? So he's saying, no, I didn't switch to those Signal apps to talk to David. We didn't talk on Signal. I switched to talk on Signal with Robert Morgenroth, and Josh Marshall. Why did you choose? Yes, I had spoken to Josh through Signal as the news broke out. Yes. Okay, next question. Why did you choose to communicate or switch to using encrypted applications to communicate with him at that point? He said, that wasn't my choice. Josh had called me on Signal through it, and then I had answered it. Okay, but when you continued to communicate with him through Signal and WhatsApp, then you continued to communicate with him through Signal and WhatsApp. Isn't that correct? He said, we had various conversations through Signal on financial matters. Yeah. Relating to David? No, relating to his company. Whose company? Josh's company. Okay. But that was related to David, since David was Josh's company's only client. Well, it was finances that Josh had regardless of David and other personal affairs he had. So, yeah. Okay, next question. Who did you have the most contact with between David and any individual in his family? The finance guy said the person I had the most contact with was David's mom. We talked fairly regularly, a couple times a week, more than 10 times a month. Did you also switch to an encrypted application in speaking with her after news came out about a dismembered body found in the trunk of David's car? He said, well, we had talked like once or twice through WhatsApp, a couple times through Signal, but that was it. Okay, but the answer to my question is yes, you switched over to encrypted apps? Yeah, but it wasn't regularly. Okay, but you switched to communicating with her through an encrypted app, whether it be Signal or WhatsApp, correct? Yes, we had spoken on Signal and WhatsApp. Yeah, but this is after the news came out about the body being found in the trunk? Yes. And why did you switch over to talking on encrypted apps? I don't think there was a specific reason one way or the other. I think she was trying to find a way to communicate and figured WhatsApp or Signal was more secure for her to communicate. I believe some of her information was leaked to the public. Okay, well, before that, she would either call you or FaceTime you, right? Yeah, she would FaceTime audio me and then have regular conversations on regular phone. We would talk on text. Okay, so there was a conscious switch, just like with Josh and Rob, that you began using an encrypted app for all of that to communicate with her, right? Yes. Okay. But that's how you continue to communicate. No. He said, I regularly speak with Rob in normal communications today. There was a very short period of time, I believe we were using WhatsApp and Signal with respect to David. Okay. So next question is, again, when were you speaking to these individuals, whether it was Rob, whether it was Josh Marshall, whether it was Colleen Burke, after the news broke about a body being found in David's Tesla? Your communications then went through an encrypted app. Isn't that correct? He said, no, because it wasn't consistent. Okay. So you're saying sometimes you would also talk about David on regular phone? Yes. Or text messages. And this is important too, because do those get picked up on a wiretap? I don't know. Maybe they do. When did you last see Colleen in person? Probably when David was opening for SZA in Miami. I'd seen her very briefly at that concert. That was late 2024, beginning of 2025. I really don't recall. And when is the last time you communicated with her at all? Not saw her in person, but just communicated. He said last week. Sourcing a new entertainment attorney. So David probably got dropped by his entertainment attorney. Who did you refer to her to, if anyone? She wasn't allowed to answer that question, which does make sense. I mean, like, why would a judge be letting them talk about who, like, these private, like lawyer references and stuff? I mean, that is not relevant for a preliminary hearing, I don't think. When is the last time you spoke to her before last week regarding sourcing a new entertainment lawyer? A week or so prior to that, 2 weeks prior to that, maybe? Okay, so you still talk to her on a regular basis? Yes. Are you doing any work for her? Still? Yes. What type of work? Well, I'm just helping right now sourcing this new entertainment attorney. That's pretty much it right now. Okay, how much are you being paid for that work? We're on a monthly retainer of $7,500 a freaking month. How much money did the defendant generate? How much money did David Burke generate between 2023 and 2025? I would say he's earned close to maybe $11.5 million in gross earnings Okay, and did you review his contract with Interscope Records or Universal Music Group? He said, no. No, I did not. I don't review those specifically, no. Oh, you didn't? Well, did you know how much he was paid in advance when he signed with Interscope in 2022? Yeah, it was $600,000. So this was an advance that David got paid. Okay. When did he also get an initial installment? Yeah, he got another payment after the end of 2022, like end of 2023. That was the larger bulk of the money. That was 2.4 million freaking dollars. Whoa. Next question. Was there also some type of recording fund paid to him through Interscope, like for things like legal fees, touring advances, tour support, things like that? Yes. And what was the amount of that approximately? Various amount, what? Tour support is on request. Okay, no. My question is, approximately how much did David receive in his recording fund from Interscope? He said, "Oh, maybe another million." I don't have a specific number. You don't know? No, I don't know. Okay, the judge wants to take the afternoon break. Okay, they came back from the break. We're still on day 1, by the way. There was 5 days of this. We're back on the record. We have all counsel present. Mr. Greger, you are under oath. And we were on direct examination. Okay. Miss Silverman. Oh, sorry. Thank you. Thank you, Your Honor. You may continue. Okay, thank you, Your Honor. Beth Silverman says, prosecutor, she says, okay. Now, before we broke for a few minutes, I asked you about the amount David received from Interscope regarding his recording fund. You said you thought it maybe was another million, but you didn't know. Is it that you don't know because you don't remember, or you didn't know because you never knew? He said, I don't remember. The amounts that were coming in were not consistent. They were funds that were requested upon. What does that mean? He said, well, so tour support is a great example of this. We have to submit a budget showing an actual loss to a tour in order for the label to pay us the loss of that tour. So certain tour runs might run at a loss of $75,000, $100,000, and we're requesting that money at that point in time from the label. Okay, next question though, but you said maybe he got another million. Could it be as much as 4 million? No. Okay. But he was your only client, right? So how much money was how much money he was bringing in was of vital importance to the survival of this company, right? That you and Josh Marshall and Robert Morgan Roth were running. Isn't that right? Yo, yeah. David's career had to survive for us to get paid. And previously you testified that you were working for Colleen, now sourcing a new entertainment attorney. Who is that for? For David. Is it for his younger brother, Caleb? No, not for Caleb. Okay. Next question. I think you mentioned earlier the trust account, the Thorn Rose Trust. It was valued at $1.2 or maybe $1.5 million with the real estate assets. Yes. Okay. Could that be up to as much as $2 million? He said, I don't know. I don't know the value. I don't know the current value of those homes. Like, the real estate market goes up and down. But didn't you testify at the grand jury that the value of that account was around $2 million? He said, well, they had added other properties that his father owned, but I don't know if they ever actually moved it into the trust or not. Okay. But do you remember testifying at the grand jury that he had over $2 million at a Morgan Stanley trust account? Yeah, he said, yep, that's correct. He did have liquid cash. So he had $2 million cash too. Liquid cash. How about a secondary trust? Was there a secondary trust? The finance guy's like, no, not that I'm aware of. But didn't you testify at the grand jury about a secondary trust? He said, well, I know that his mom was setting up a new trust. Ooh, they trying to hide money? What they trying to do with the second trust? Are you talking about when you said, quote, a new trust? You're talking about the trust that you helped Colleen set up to move money around to pay for bail? Oh, is that what you're referring to? He said she wasn't setting up a new trust outside of the Thorn Rose Trust. She was eventually going to put the Hempstead house into this trust. I don't know if she ever did that or not. But what was the purpose of that? Let me rephrase. Did you and Colleen discuss why you might want to help her in moving money around? Yes. What was the reason for that? Bail. So was there also an IRA set up for David? Yes. How much is the value of that IRA? He said, today, nothing. The value is zero. Well, why is that? That money was disbursed, he said. It went back to his D4vd account. Okay. Well, you testified to the grand jury of the value of that account at that time, right? That was back in February this year. So now, since February this year, there was money in it, and now the money's gone? Yep. What was the value of that before it was disbursed back into the David account? $150,000. Okay. But didn't you also say there was another different trust account that was set up for Colleen and his father, for Colleen the mom and for the dad, Dawood? Yeah, Colleen had set up a new trust account. I don't know if it's been finalized yet. What was the value of that new trust account? Well, she and her husband were the beneficiaries. I don't know who's the beneficiaries. Oh, you don't know? No. Okay, fine. Next question. How about the trust account set up for David's brother and sister? What's the value of that account? There's trust for the mom and the dad, and the trust for the sister, and the trust for the brother, and the trust for the David, and the trust for the... how many trusts we need? He said they don't have an account. That brother and sister do not have a trust account. Do you remember testifying about that at the grand jury? About testifying that Dawood and Colleen are beneficiaries of a trust? Along with Caleb and Emily, the kids, the other kids, David's brother and sister? That trust account had over $2 million in it? He said, yeah, but that was the Thorn Rose Trust account. Okay, but then you just said the one you said was for David. Yes, that was David's trust. Girl, how many trusts are there? Okay, next question. As the finance director, how much did Mogul Vision make from David as a client between 2023 and the end of 2025? Josh made $3.5–4 million. And you said that company is now defunct? He said, no, I don't know if it's defunct. I believe it's still an active company. Okay, but how is it you learned about there being a dead body? Okay, so okay. Beep. Enough questions about finances. Now we're getting to the literal nitty gritty. How is it you learned about there being a dead body in David and your client David's car September last year while he was out on tour? Like, how'd you learn about it? Without telling us what was said, how did you learn about it? Internet, TV, someone called you? I got a call from Josh. Okay, the owner of Mogul Vision called this finance guy. He wasn't specific, but he learned about the details of it through the internet. So Josh, the owner, Josh Marshall, saw it online and called this guy and told him, there's a body in the trunk. Okay. Wow, this is crazy. Next question. Okay. And when Josh called you, did he call you, as you referred to earlier, using the word normal? Did he call you through an encrypted app? Yeah, that's when he called me through Signal. First time ever or what? Let me get to some of these real quick. Thank you for the super chats and stuff, everybody. My mouth is really hurting, but I want to finish this day one, and we're on the downhill. So thank you for the little encouraging tokens and things. I really appreciate it. Thank you for the $1.99, Jenny. Thank you to Variety Pirate for the 10 jewels and the 2 jewels. Thank you so much to Tori for the 200 jewels. Thank you to Tammy for the 1,000 jewels. Got a loot box. Thank you to Canadian Crystal for the $10 Canadian. Thank you for going back and reading through all this. I wait for your shows because you're great at it. Have a beautiful day. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. I agree, Eileen. The name is very interesting for Pentecostals. I'd completely agree. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. I've noticed that before. Okay, so how did you learn about it? He learned about it from the owner of the company, Josh. Okay, and when Josh called you, did he call through Signal? Yes. Did you also speak with Robert Morgenroth while he was on tour with David once you saw the news? Because Robert Morgenroth was on the tour with David, the day-to-day manager. He said, yes, I spoke with Rob. Did you ask Rob any questions about the details of what he knew? Yeah, he said, I curiously sure did. I asked Rob what he knew. Okay, Mr. Gregor, do you remember testifying at the grand jury that you didn't ask any questions because you didn't want to know? He said, yeah, I said that. So is that true? Or is your testimony today true? Because now you're saying you asked him questions, but before you were saying you didn't ask him anything because you didn't want to know. He said, my testimony today is true. I did ask him, and he told me. Okay. So when you said at the grand jury that you didn't ask Rob any questions because you didn't want to know, that would not be correct. I'd say that's not correct, yeah. Okay. What questions did you ask Rob about the details? He said, I just asked Rob Morgenroth plainly what happened. And what did he tell you? This is the thing that I want to know the most about. It's like a landmine, and she just rolls right through it. I asked Robert Morgenroth plainly what happened. Okay, and what did he tell you? Answer, he did tell me, yes. Next question, how many times would you say you've spoken to Rob since he got back from that canceled tour and the rest of the tour was canceled? Oh, I talk to Rob regularly. From September to the end of approximately September, maybe a handful of times, approximately 2-3 times out of the month. I'd say pretty regularly, at least once a week now. Okay, so when you testified at the grand jury that you had spoken to Rob 50 or 60 times since the tour, that would be correct? Yes. Okay, so back in September 2025, after the tour, the remaining portion of David's tour was canceled. This was before he was ever arrested. Is that when you began discussing money and bail with Colleen? So before David was arrested, they started talking about bail. They knew he was going to get arrested. And it makes sense. I mean, if a body is found in your car, you're probably getting arrested. Was there a certain amount of bail the two of you were trying to put together? Yeah, I think we were trying to raise like $2 million. Okay, and at some point, did you discuss or start to process putting the two homes to post them as collateral for bail? He said the Cypress house was the intent to add, yes, the Cypress house was the intent to add as collateral on the bail, yes. And the Hempstead house was never supposed to be used for collateral. But which one did you say was going to be used for collateral? That was going to be the Cypress house in Cypress, Texas. Okay. Do you remember testifying the opposite at the grand jury, that you used the Hempstead house? That was probably the one that was worth the most and had the most you were using for bail. He said, well, I mean, the Hempstead house definitely had more value, but it was also where everybody was living. David, also where Colleen, Dawood, Caleb, and Emily were living. So again, we're finding out, David was not living with his parents at the time, before he was arrested and after the tour was canceled. She said, okay, yeah, but that wasn't my question. My question was, did you testify at the grand jury at the end of February this year that you used the Hempstead house, and the Hempstead house was probably the one that was worth the most, and you were going to put that one up for collateral for David's bail? Didn't you say that? We did not use the Hempstead house. Okay, so when you testified, quote, and then we used the Hempstead house, and the Hempstead house was probably the one that was worth the most, was that testimony also false? I don't recall. Okay, well, what's true today, Mr. Gregor? Because before, you just testified that the only house you discussed was the Cypress house. He said, yeah, that's true. Okay, so it was false when you testified that you were also using the Hempstead house? He said, I don't recall mentioning Hempstead house being used for collateral in terms of David's bail. Okay, all right, next question. So for court and counsel, I'm looking at page 1018 from the grand jury transcripts from this man the same man who's now sitting up here talking. I asked him, quote, what did you discuss? This was the question I asked you, quote, and you answered, quote, we discussed the potential that if a bail was to be set, they were going to try for $2 million. And we needed to presumptively put together what collateral would be used for that. Do you remember answering that at the grand jury? Yes, he said. Okay, and then a little bit further down, I asked, quote, so you needed to come up with collateral, and you answered, quote, correct. And I asked, so what did you do? And you said, Dawood owned several rental properties within the Houston, Texas area. So I got a list of those properties, went on Zillow to see what the estimated value would be, and we used those numbers to send back to Blair Burke. And then we used the Hempstead house, and the Hempstead house was probably the one that was worth the most. And I asked you at the grand jury, how much is that house worth? And you said approximately $950,000. Do you remember that now? Yes, I do. So, was that correct? I don't believe we ever used the Hempstead house. No. For bail, no. Okay, the judge kind of says like, all right, you've asked enough about this. Can you move on? And she says, all right, yeah, I'm getting to the end, Your Honor. Thank you. I appreciate the allowance. Okay. Then, next question. You actually helped Colleen move money around from checking accounts to make available for bail, didn't you? He said, correct. And did you tell Colleen she should move the title? Okay, so they're bringing up, remember this was all over the Reddit and everything. I made a video about it and stuff. The parents started moving the house out of David's name into the mom's name and all that. Didn't you change the title to the properties from David's name into Colleen's name? Yes. And why did you tell her she should move those properties from David's name, since they were his homes purchased with his money, into her name? He said the understanding was that the Hempstead home was for the family. So we moved the title so it couldn't basically get the family kicked out of their house. Okay, but next question. You do remember testifying that the reason you told Colleen to do that was to, quote, protect the estate from a civil suit? Oh, this isn't good. This isn't good. You can't be doing this. So when Celeste's lawyer and family sues David, they were trying to hide this house. Do you remember testifying at the grand jury that the reason you told Colleen to move the title from the houses was to protect David's estate from a civil suit, so the victim, Celeste Rivas Hernandez family, wouldn't be able to obtain those or get access to that money? He said, yeah, I did say that, yeah. Did you actually prepare documents for David's signature in order to transfer the title from his name to his mom's name, so you could prevent any sort of civil suit by the victim's family from accessing those monies? He said, no, I did not. Well, do you remember testifying that you did prepare such documents for David's signature? He said, I did not prepare any signature documents for him. No, I did not. Okay, well, did you give her a person who could prepare those documents to move them in her name? Yes, I did. Okay. I don't think I have any further questions, Your Honor. I thank you for allowing me to explore these issues. Okay. So now it's time for David's, this is going to be rough. I have a feeling this is about to get rough. David's lawyer, Blair Burke, is about to come up and do the cross-examination. She says, sir, wasn't there a problem with the Hempstead house having a Texas homestead on it, and so in any event it couldn't be used for bail? Yes. How old are you, sir? I'm 34. And when you began providing financial services to David, were all of your clients people in the music industry? Yes. And you were trained in the finance industry prior to beginning work with David, weren't you? Yes. And you worked at a top 25 accounting firm, didn't you? Yes. And the firm is called Citron Cooperman? Yes. And how many years did you work for them? Not very long. Prior to that, I was at 2 smaller boutique management firms that specialized more. The first one was more like TV and film, and then I moved into the music industry in 2015, and then I stayed in the music industry after that. So I was at Citron for like 7 months before moving on to a new boutique firm. Okay, David's lawyer, Blair Burke, says, how long were you in finance before you started working with David? He said, well, I started my finance career in 2013. And you had met David prior to formally providing financial services, right? Yes. And you met him at a music shoot in Phoenix around the fall or September of 2022? No, I did not. Did you meet him in 2022? No, I did not. Was he 17 years old when you first met David? Yes, he was 17. And was he living with his family in Texas? Yes. And that's when you first met his mom and his brother and his sister, right? Because he was living with them? He said, well, I had met his mom and his dad. Okay, David's lawyer goes on. But you learned that, and this was prior to him moving out to Los Angeles, right? Yes. And he moved out to LA in March 2023. Okay, this is a big one. I want to remember this. Hold on, I got to get my notebook. What is it? March 20. Okay. March 2023, he moves to LA from Texas. I recall David moving at the end of 2023. Okay, so not March 2023. After he had recently turned 18. Okay. As soon as he turns 18, he moves out of his parents' house into LA. You learned he had been homeschooled by his mom, right? That is correct. And he moved to LA for his music career. Isn't that right? Yes. Okay, so this is not Blair Burke. This is Bednarski. But it still is David's lawyer. He had moved to LA for his music career, isn't that right? Yes. But his family and his church were a strong part of his social community in Texas. The judge said, we're not letting you ask that. And just so it's clear, because the people went into quite a bit of detail as it relates to this witness's dealings with the family and conversations with the family, the court is going to allow David's lawyers to explore his relationship with the family members, because y'all were asking the questions over there at the prosecution. And so, yeah, we're going to let the questions come forward. But as it relates to all this extraneous matters, like who he had support, who David had support from, like his family and his church, that is completely irrelevant, is not as to this witness's relationship. Okay, so anybody else about who David had a relationship with or didn't, that's nothing to do with his relationship with this witness. So we need to keep it to this witness. The financial relationship or any other type of relationship with David and his family, this relates to bearing on this witness's credibility, bias, motive, or whatever else either side wishes to argue. Okay, I hope that clarifies it for both sides. That was the judge. So David's lawyer says, all right, Mr. Gregor, you told us that Robert Morgenroth was engaged to be the person who was on the ground in LA. Isn't that correct? Yes. And he was really here to manage David's day-to-day, right? Yes. And to your knowledge, David had no family members living in Los Angeles, right? Right. And that was his first independent living experience. To come to LA for his music career? Yes. And was the purpose of you meeting his mom and dad in Texas before he moved out here to get to know the family? Yes. It was advised by Josh that I should get to know the parents, Colleen and Dawood, specifically Colleen, the momager. Okay, and that was because you understood that Colleen would be handling David's finances and working with you in that regard. Isn't that right? Yes. And before David started in Los Angeles with his music career, he had been an online gamer as a teenager. Isn't that right? Objection. He's like, the judge said, yeah, I'm going to sustain because what does this have to do with his relationship with Gregor? The lawyer goes on. Okay, fine. To your knowledge, in being hired to work with David as his financial director, you understood that he didn't have a prior formal experience in the music industry. Isn't that right? Correct. Okay, thank you. Next question. Josh Marshall, you told us, had brought you in to work with David. Isn't that right? Yes. And Josh's formal role with David was his personal manager. Isn't that right? Yes. So Josh was going to personally manage David's career as a musical artist, right? Yes. And you were going to do the finances, right? Yes. And at the time, you had known Josh for several years, right? Yes. I think you told us since 2016 or 17. Yes. And is it a fair statement that your work with David encompassed all financial aspects of him as a musical artist? Yes. Okay. So earlier you told us there were 3 different companies that were set up for David's career. One was for recording, one was for merchandise, and one was for publishing. Is that correct? Yes. Okay. And those were set up before you got involved in helping with finances, weren't they? Yes. And it was Colleen who had set them up, isn't it? Yes. And those had been set up by Colleen when he was a minor. Isn't that right? Objection, objection. Sustained. Okay, fine. Well, with respect to the finances. Next question. With respect to the finances, that had to do with money he was earning or going to earn as a result of his contracts, right? Yes. And costs and expenses of having that kind of career, right? Yes. Okay, next question. And you had to understand, even if you didn't read every contract line by line, you had to understand what these various relationships were that would generate various sums of money. Isn't that right? Yes. And did you understand that any contracts having to do with David? Oh, sorry, excuse me. And okay, next question. And did you understand that any contracts having to do on David's behalf with him before he turned 18 would require special provisions because a guardian would have had to essentially protected the minor? Yes, that is correct. Okay, and I can't recall, so clarify for us, did you bring in Rob Morgenroth or did Josh? Josh brought in Rob Morgenroth. Okay. But you knew, or at least you came to know, that Josh had experience in the travel business, right? No, it was Robert Morgenroth that had experience in the travel business. Oh, right. Sorry. Did I say Josh? Sorry. Apologize for that. Okay. Rob had experience. You came to understand Rob had experience in the travel business, helping musical artists with their tour arrangements. Okay, we got a Corey Gamble. Look, let the record reflect. I called Corey Handler Gamble in 2022. Corey Handler Gamble. Now that's basically his name online. Anyway, yes, Rob is a tour arrangements guy. Corey Gamble worked on tour as a tour manager for Justin Bieber. Then he ended up dating Kris Jenner for years and still does apparently. Okay. And Rob Morgenroth owned a travel agency that worked on tour logistics. Isn't that right? Yes. And you were living in Florida at the time? Yes. And Rob lived in Florida when you first met him too, right? No, I met Rob before he lived in Florida. I'm not sure where he was living at that time. Okay. But at some point in early 2023 or sometime in 2023, Robert moved out to manage David. Isn't that right? From a day-to-day perspective? Yes. Okay, next question. And management of a musical artist's day-to-day schedule includes going to meetings. Isn't that true? She's got to rephrase the question. Okay, let me rephrase. Okay. Mr. Gregor, you understood that Rob was being paid for his management duties, right? Yes. And did Mogul Vision directly pay Rob? Or did David's business pay Rob? Mogul Vision? Okay, next question. Did you understand from the financial documents that you reviewed that the musical career involved recording sessions and video shoots? Yes. And did you understand that it would involve interviews and meetings? Yes. Tours, performances? Yes. And did you understand that it was Robert Morgenroth's job to manage that heavy day-to-day schedule of David's musical career? Yes. Okay, and in your capacity as David's finance director, did you have knowledge of the house that Mogul Vision was leasing, the house that David was staying at in LA? He said, yeah, I knew about it. And you understood that 50% of those leasing costs were paid for by David's business? Ooh, that's interesting. 50% of the rent was being paid by David's business, 50% by Mogul. Specifically, Colleen would pay the bill, right? Well, she would approve it. Right. Okay. She would approve it. So, next question. Even though the lease had been arranged by Mogul Vision, you set up the utility services for that rental house. Isn't that right? He said, yes. And David did none of these things for himself. He didn't obtain the lease. He didn't arrange the lease. He didn't set up the utilities bill. He did none of that. Isn't that true? Right. Okay. So before, one of your big responsibilities of your job was accounts payable, right? Like making sure the bills were paid. Isn't that right? Yes. And as we've talked about, a recording artist who is performing and touring generates a lot of costs and expenses. Isn't that right? Yes, it does. And it requires a lot of service providers and equipment. Yes. Touring buses, lighting, audio, insurance, all that. Yes. And all that's a lot to keep track of, isn't that right? Yes. It's a lot to pay on time, right? Yes. And to pay promptly so that these tours and these performances and everything occurs on time, right? Yes. And it was part of your job to determine, well, would these bills come to you from Rob Morganroth? Yes. But they'd also come directly sometimes from vendors? Yes. And was it part of your job to look at these bills and determine if the services were provided? Yes. And if the services and the costs and everything were reasonable, you had to determine that, right? Yes. So if you saw some crazy bill that didn't seem right to you about what the actual service had been, you would have questioned it, right? He said, yes. And just to make sure that there was money there to pay the bills, you had to make sure of that too, right? Yes. Okay. So you, as the finance director, had access to all of David's business accounts, right? Yes. And so did his mom, Colleen? Yes. And you had no ongoing direct contact with David directly about his bills, right? Right. You had no ongoing direct contact with David about his income, right? He said correct. It was Colleen who was your contact with respect to the financial management of David's career. Isn't that right? Yeah, that's correct. Okay. So even though the prosecutor brought out, even though she may not have been formally trained in accounting, she could use QuickBooks, right? Yeah. And you helped her with that, right? Yeah. And she got better at it, didn't she? He said, I don't know. Okay, fine. Let me ask this. As Colleen became more familiar, did you feel that she managed the bookkeeping adequately? He said no. Did you feel that Colleen managed the bookkeeping adequately? He said no, she did not. Well, did you speak with her a lot in order to make sure that things were being paid on time? Yes. And you told us that Colleen was paid a salary to do this work that she did through David's company, right? Yes. Okay, so, but you, in order to help her and help her do her job well, you would prepare summaries of the expenses, isn't that right? He said, yeah. Then you would send those summaries to her? Yes. But you didn't send those summaries to David himself, did you? No, I did not. And I think you told us this already, but it was Colleen who would approve the payment? Right. So if you reviewed a bill, for example, and you determined it needed to be paid, you would talk to Colleen, you would make sure that she understood what it was for, and you would get her approval, right? Correct. And you had access to David's bank accounts for the purpose of making payments, didn't you? Yes. But she did too, didn't she, Colleen? Yes. And you almost never spoke to David about bills and expenses, right? Yes, that's correct. So I think you told us at some point, Mr. Greger, that there was some kind of a code you needed from David that had been sent to his phone. Was that highly unusual? He said, yeah, it wasn't normal. The judge said, let me stop you right there. We're going to go ahead and break for the day. It's 4 o'clock and we'll come back tomorrow at 9:30. Mr. Greger, you're ordered back here at 9:15 in the morning without any further order or notice, and we're going to finish up your testimony tomorrow morning. Okay, thank you. Lawyers, I'm going to order you back at 9:15 so we can set up and be ready for 9:30. All right, Miss Silverman? Sure. Thank you, Your Honor. The court. Thank you. Bye. Okay, so that was day one. That was day one. Yeah, that was cross-examination. That was day one. We finally finished it. Took us quite a while. That's okay. My mouth hurts. That's okay. Thank you, Carinza, for the 30 jewels. Thank you, Soda Freak, for the 30 jewels. And Carinza for the 6 jewels. How do they sleep at night? Indeed. How do they sleep at night? Indeed. Let me see if we have gotten any other transcripts. Check in on that. Okay, let me see. Just looking to see if we've gotten any other transcripts. We did just finish the day one. I do think I want to try to push through and do all of them. So we would be done with 1 out of 5 days so far. I'm checking my sources to see if anyone's gotten these transcripts yet. No. Okay. Thank you so much to Columbo Sean for the 10 jewels. I guess I'm going to cut this one short for today. I'm like actually in a lot of pain. I had a dental like procedure done on Thursday and I'm still like kind of in pain. I'll take a couple questions. Sistercraft, what is my outlook on this so far? The biggest things I think that I saw from day one, let's see. David moving to Hollywood or LA, pretty much as soon as he turned 18. That was a big one. Robert Morgenroth seemingly knowing exactly what happened is a big one. What else? The matching tattoos. It seems like David's lawyers are trying to make it seem like David didn't understand his finances, and maybe he didn't. I mean, like, honestly, most famous people don't pay their own bills. Most famous people and celebrities like this, like, don't even lease their own houses and stuff. It's very rare. So he might not have known how many exact dollars he had in his bank account, but he definitely knew that his career could be messed up. And what is a career for? To make money and to earn. That's how you earn your wages and how you earn your living. And so Celeste was telling him, I'll ruin your career. So I think that's good enough to show the financial loss was possible. Day one, I'm already wondering why Morgenroth isn't on trial. And a big reason is because these people have access to the money still. They really do have to like single out 1 or 2 people and give everybody else immunity, or else no one's ever going to be able to like actually go to jail when these rich people get in trouble, because it sucks. I'm not happy about it. But like if it's like 5 people with access to like all of the coffers of Universal Music or Interscope, then they're just going to keep putting money out there and they're going to make it harder and harder to convict somebody. Now, I hope they do prosecute Morgenroth. I hope they do. But anyway, that's all I really had for this one. In the meantime, facts ain't defamation, neither are opinions. Make sure you're subscribed. Thanks for hyping and liking. Thank you, Summer of 88 for the $1.99. And if y'all want to throw into the donation, you could do the super thanks. You could do the legal fund. I have to stop talking now. My mouth hurts. Love you, Mina. Okay, bye.